insulting various NATO countries. OK, mainly Britain, but he has today had to go at France too. He's warned the UK today in a post on Truth Social, the US won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Well, I remember many occasions in the last few decades when Britain has been there for the United States. For example, in the First Gulf War. For example, in Afghanistan. For example, in Iraq. Need I go on? Britain has been the most reliable ally of the United States of any country in NATO since NATO was formed in 1949. And I don't know about you, but I am getting sick and tired of the abuse that the President of the United States is throwing at our country. And I suspect the good citizens of France are feeling a little bit the same today after he did the same to them. But that sentence really jumped out at me from his post on Truth Social because it really made me think, not for the first time, but it probably reinforced the view that the future of NATO is now in real jeopardy. Because without the United States as the leading member of NATO, and they would say the leading funder of NATO, has NATO got any future? That is the question I think we are going to have to ask ourselves. Maybe not for the first time, but I think before, a lot of us have thought, well, it'll all go right in the end. I'm not sure it will now. I'm really not, because I don't know whether Donald Trump is just making a mountain out of a molehill here, but I genuinely believe that he feels he's been slighted by Keir Starmer and the attitude of the British government to what's going on in Iran. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that position because all governments of all countries have a duty to do what they think is right for them. Now, I don't agree with a lot of what Keir Starmer has done in this, but it does not deserve the kind of abuse that Donald Trump is meting out at the moment towards this country. And to post this within minutes of the news going live that the King and the Queen are going to go to America at the end of April on a state visit. I mean, the timing was incredibly crass. Now, I suspect that was more cock-up rather than conspiracy, but you never know, do you? Now, after Trump made that post on Truth Social, his defence secretary, or war secretary as he likes to be known, Pete Hegseth, gave a press conference and said this.
I think the president was clear this morning in his truth that there are countries around the world who ought to be prepared to step up on this critical waterway as well. It's not just the United States Navy. Last time I checked, there was supposed to be a big bad Royal Navy that could be prepared to do things like that as well. So he's pointing out this is an international waterway that we use less than most, in fact, dramatically less than most. So the world ought to pay attention to be prepared to stand up. President Trump's been willing to do the heavy lifting on behalf of the free world to address this threat of Iran. It's not just our problem set going forward, even though we have done the lion's share of preparation to ensure that that strait will be open, which is an outcome the president's been very clear on.
So the question I've got for you in this hour, is the NATO alliance potentially at an end? I had the word potentially in there because I can't bring myself to think that the alliance which has kept the peace for, ever since it was formed in 1949, could really be about to disintegrate. But I think we have to contemplate that now, don't we? Robert Fox is defence commentator for the newspaper and for The Independent. Robert, very good evening to you. Is it an exaggeration to say that the whole of the NATO alliance is now in real danger?
I think what we have to watch here is the game of misdirection. And I think even Trump and Hegseth in their way, in black circumstances, could apply to join the magic circle for misdirection, because we have to ask ourselves, why are they saying this? Why are they being so crass? Because slagging off allies doesn't encourage them to come to their aid. The Israeli-American war effort in Iran is in trouble. I'm not just saying that. The markets are saying that. Take Peel Hunt, bankers in the City of London. They have warned today that Trump is losing control of his war. This is what's happening. It's a bizarre way to go about damage limitation. Yes, there is an enormous crisis in and around the Straits of Hormuz, as there is over the Bab el-Mandeb. But who created it? That's part of the problem here. And how are we going to get out of it? It's going to take a long time. No, NATO is not dead, and NATO will not be dead. It is going to change radically, and radically in a way that may be very embarrassing to particularly the Trump, Hegseth, Vance leadership, but to the United States. It's going to go much more regional. And I think that they're preparing for that, because already you've got separate alliances building within the NATO alliance. We've seen it with the Joint Expeditionary Force, with the northern countries. And I think Britain will also be involved in an equivalent of the JEF for the Levant. By that, I mean the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea Gulf area, because we are faced with America the unreliable, and it's the mercurial nature of the Trump presidency has come across in this second incarnation, the second presidency, to such an extreme degree. I think it's taken everybody by surprise, friend and foe.
But, I mean, the Trump presidency will be over in less than 3 years' time, and we don't know what will come after that. I mean, if it's J.D. Vance, well, back to where we started, I suppose, but it might not be. We've got to be very careful about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, haven't we?
Well, I think under the blanket, that's not happening. The grown-ups in the party really are talking, even what remains of the grown-ups of the United States diplomatic service, despite Rubio, despite Hegseth. I know the commands, the intelligence community does talk a lot, and they must be quite worried about it. Sorry, understatement of probably the quarter century, because they are confronting precisely the question that you've put, Iain. What do we do? What do we do next? How are we going to staunch the flow? What's the damage limitation that we can do now? And how do we set things that we can get some semblance of stability within the next 2 years, anticipating whoever comes into the White House?
Robert, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much. That's Robert Fox, defence commentator for the newspaper and for The Independent. Well, let's get an American view on this from Daniel Freed, former US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, and also its former ambassador to Poland. Daniel, very good evening. Thank you for talking to us. We are sort of on this side of the Atlantic flummoxed, to say the least, at some of the language that Donald Trump is using and abusing our country. It seems almost on repeat now. Virtually every day he finds an excuse to insult the United Kingdom. What should we read into that in the long term?
Well, first, I share your outrage. The language is ugly and pointless. So your frustration and anger is completely understandable. That said, I would not throw out the alliance. I would not assume that Trump's tweets are an ultimate indication of even of where his own administration ends up. Certainly not where the United States will end up after whatever it is we're going through now is finished. So I would hold on to the alliance, but prepare for a rough ride. And certainly I would take this point from the Trump administration seriously. Europe needs to do more for its own defense. American administrations have made this point for decades, and it is true. So I share the frustration. I think some of it is due to Trump's own frustration that his war against Iran is not going according to plan. He's not clear. I don't think he's clear in his own mind how this ends. So he's lashing out, trying to find various punching bags. As I said, I don't like this very much, but whether I like it or not is irrelevant. It's important to understand what is happening. It's not the end of the alliance. It's a particularly nasty period. And the king in his visit will have a great deal of work to do, and I wish him all the best.
Well, I think we all do. But you said it's not the end of the alliance, but to misquote Churchill, it could be the beginning of the end. And I think that's what a lot of people on this side of the Atlantic, not just in this country, but I think more widely in Europe, are contemplating now. How damaging would that be to the whole idea of Western defence if NATO was in some way to be, well, either to disintegrate or to be diminished?
It would be damaging indeed. The West is faced with a virulently aggressive adversary in the form of Vladimir Putin. Putin is serious. He thinks he can win in Ukraine, although, by the way, we have the tools to help the Ukrainians prevail. But that's another issue. If he succeeds in Ukraine, he will move on to the Baltics. He will move on to Moldova. He intends to take down the Western alliance and restore the Russian Empire. He is serious about this. So the end of the Western alliance would undo what we have taken for granted, which is Europe as a united strategic actor and asset for the free world. And NATO helped solve the centuries-old problem of European powers fighting amongst each other. We've taken that better world for granted. The end of the alliance puts all of this at risk. No, I don't think Germany and France are going to go to war. That's not my point. My point is that Europe has been able to work with the United States on behalf of a united West and done so for decades. Yeah, losing this alliance would be terrible.
Just finally, do you think Donald Trump has any sense of history? Does he even realise that Britain on its own lost hundreds of brave service personnel in Afghanistan when we did come to the aid of America after 9/11? Similarly with the first Gulf War, similarly in Iraq. He doesn't seem to acknowledge this at all. And I mean, that I think is the most insulting part of it.
It is inexcusable and it is appalling. I worked in the administration of George W. Bush in the run-up and during the Iraq War. I am well familiar with British sacrifice and the sacrifice of many other European countries, including Denmark, by the way, who hardly deserved the threats visited on it by the Trump administration. Again, your outrage is unfortunately justified. The question is, what do we do with this moment? And giving into outrage is not really going to get us where we want to be. I think that I have the greatest sympathy for European leaders, Alexander Stubb, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister, who are all trying to find ways to work with Trump as constructively as possible, to limit the damage of Trump's more ill-considered ideas, and to keep our collective eye on the ball, which is the Western alliance at the heart of the free world. Russia is the virulent adversary. China is the rising problem. So we need a free world strategy, and we have to get past Trump. No, he doesn't have a sense of history, and his historical lessons are drawn from the worst traditions of American strategic thinking, the isolationism, which was really indifference to the rise of Hitler, unilateralism, and a kind of neo-imperialism, which I think does injustice to Presidents McKinley and James K. Polk, but that's another story.
It is, and interesting you should mention those gentlemen, because I've just finished editing a book on US presidential election campaigns in which Carl Rove has written the chapter on McKinley. He's a bit of an expert on him. Daniel, I can see why you were an ambassador. You've been a great diplomat in some of your answers there. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Daniel Freed there, former US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs and former ambassador to Poland. Right, lots of calls coming in. Is NATO in danger? What can be done about it? Or do you think we just have to sit tight and wait for the Trump era to finish and the normal world order will be restored? Not so sure that's going to happen, personally. 18 minutes past 7.
This is LBC.
Right then, who's all in for Cancer Research UK's Race for Life? Anglers, ramblers, climbers, five-a-siders, surfers, gamers, bikers, hang gliders. Book clubbers. Are we up for it? Let's go all in against cancer, all in to help fund life-saving research. Sign up now and save 50% off entry to your local 3K, 5K, 10K or Pretty Muddy event. Search Race for Life. Discount ends April 19th, 2026. T's and C's apply.
At AJ Bell, we believe investing is for everyone. And when we say everyone, we mean your dad, Dan, Danielle, Dean, Dave, Dale, Dell's delivery driver Denise, Denise's dentist Dinesh, and Devon's strongest man, Donathan. Donathan, that can't be right. Donathan? Well, whatever your name is, if you're a real person, investing is for you too. AJ Bell, feel good investing. The value of your investments can go up or down.
Join the thousands of heat pump owners feeling warm and fuzzy.
I've lived here 20 years. I ain't moving, so I thought better future-proof my home.
We started a trend. The whole street's applying for the government grant now.
With the energy it saves, I don't know what's better off, the planet or my wallet.
And Eddie's a little bookworm. Says it's 3 times more efficient than our old boiler.
Feel all warm and fuzzy inside with a £7,500 government grant towards your heat pump at gov.uk/clean energy.
Eligibility criteria apply. See website for details.
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
19 minutes past 7. If you've just tuned in, we're asking, is the NATO alliance in danger after Donald Trump's latest tirade, not just against the United Kingdom, but also France? Let's go to Paul in Worcester Park. Hello, Paul.
Hello there. First of all, before I deal with the NATO bit, I will say that I think from the outset we should have supported Trump. I think when the Israeli Prime Minister made his speech to the UN a couple of months ago saying that America and Israel were fighting Europe's wars for it and for our future, I think he was correct. I think the fact we can rely on NATO is laughable. European countries can't get their act together. They won't necessarily stick up for one another. They have too many conflicting interests. Some of their colonies, ex-colonies, sometimes rub up against each other. France didn't support us in the Falkland War. They sold exercises to the Argentinians. Spain.
Well, hang on a minute. That's not wholly. Well, they did sell exercises to the Argentinians, yes, but that was before the war. They didn't sell them to them during the war.
No,
and actually, if you
them with parts,
no, they also provided huge amounts of intelligence to the British government, and Margaret Thatcher was very grateful to President Mitterrand for doing so.
Well, Spain didn't support us, and also over Bosnia, we couldn't get our act together. I just think Europe is unable to get its act together at the moment. It's weak. It has what Nietzsche would have called like a collective slave morality at the moment. I cannot believe it did not come to the aid of America, or even not necessarily to the aid of them, just fought with them on this matter, because the very fact that the Iran has been able to have power over the Straits from us for the last 10, 15 years is ridiculous and should have been dealt with a long time ago anyway. And the fact that that this was started, we should have backed him up. You know, our security is far more with America than it is at present with Europe. Until Europe gets its act together, it's collectively and politically and morally weak at the moment. And I believe that each country would put its own interests first. That's self-evident that all countries put what they think is their national interests first. That was Keir Starmer's justification for not taking part in the military action. I agree with you up to a point. I agree with you that Spain, France, Italy and Britain should be allowing American planes to fly from their bases. Now, Britain is now, but Italy isn't, Spain isn't, and France isn't. And look, they have to make their own independent decisions. I agree with you. I think that's a mistake. Where I part with you is that I don't think it is incumbent on European countries to go into military action unless they're sure what the end game is. And Donald Trump has failed to explain what the end game is. What does victory look like? Well, in that case, rather than relying on him to make the end game, they could decide what the end game themselves should be. What the end game should be, without doubt, is Iran doesn't have control over those straits. And I don't see why we're leaving America to deal with it. Imagine America does lose this war. Are we now, which I don't think they will actually, to be honest, are we going to allow Iran to be in charge of those straits? Because that was what would happen if we don't back America up and America doesn't win. And what is worse is if they do win, America is not going to let us forget this. And I actually do believe America will win this, actually. I think there's a load of naysayers out there at the moment. And they're not going to let us forget this. I really think we've got we've put our allegiances in the wrong place here. We should be backing America far more. Not Trump, but America. And at the moment, is America still that is doing this?
Well, if you put it round that way, American public opinion does not support Donald Trump on this war.
Public opinion, as you know, is very fickle. If he wins this, which he will, that public opinion will change. They will win it, okay, and it will be America that will benefit from this. And they're not going to forget that we didn't help them out. I just can't understand why Europe as a whole is not helping America out on this. I do partly know why. It's because I do believe that
that we have such a large Muslim voting base now, it disturbs slightly how certain politicians make their decisions. But I think we're definitely backing the wrong people at the moment, and we should get in behind America.
You seriously believe that the reason Keir Starmer isn't backing America is because of the Muslim vote?
It's a partial reason. Yeah, I don't believe he's made it from any moral standpoint. The man's too weak. I think he initially made the decision because he is scared of the Muslim vote. I think now that the polling is a bit more in his favour, he's now going that way for those reasons. But I don't believe his decisions are made on any actual true moral standpoint. No,
Okay. Well, I mean, we're going slightly off the subject of NATO, but there we are. Paul, thank you. Let's go to Patrick in Leamington Spa. Hello, Patrick.
Hey, and thanks for having me on.
Not at all. What would you like to say?
So one of the things I wanted to talk about was the fact that Donald Trump was elected, and I think he was elected because most Americans were tired of the politicking around dealing with aggressive countries like Iran, like Syria, and so on. And America has generally been the one who has initiated. We talk about the Gulf Wars, both of them. We talk about Afghanistan. This was America trying to stand up to what they perceive as a world threat, not really for any reason other than that. Now, some would say maybe it was for oil or for financial gain, but I tend to see Americans looking at themselves as people who are basically the superheroes, and they go out and they stand up to these nations. And I think NATO and the UN, for that matter, have outlived their usefulness. And I think if we abolish that, we might find a different alternative that might be a little more progressive and what the world needs at this point.
Well, were you saying that after 9/11, when all NATO countries rallied to the support of the United States?
You know, I would agree that in 9/11 there was quite a world bonding. But I mean, if you fast forward to now and you see what appears to be a radical Muslim mayor of New York City, is almost unbelievable that could even happen. But then you have now this rise of Islam and radical Islam, not just a scattered few terrorists, but you're talking about a real legitimate fear. And I think that...
Well, some might say that radical Islam has only really reared its ugly head since the war in Iraq.
I don't know if it's been since the war of Iraq, but I definitely would agree that the war in Iraq was probably, I think it was Bill Clinton who did not want to go into Iraq because he feared the fallout from being there, and he feared.
Well, it was actually George Bush the first that didn't. I mean, once the military action was finished, they could have gone on to Baghdad and probably deposed Saddam Hussein. Then it was actually George H.W. Bush who decided that would not be a good idea for the reasons that you've just said. I don't know where you've got it from. I don't know why you've mentioned Clinton.
It was Clinton was one of the reasons why he did not go after Osama bin Laden when they had a chance before 9/11. And part of the thinking, I think, back then was that would destabilize the region. And that's where I'm getting it from. However, I mean, really, what is the purpose of NATO? What is the purpose of all these UN organizations? And the U.S. is the number one financial contributor to these organizations. I think they legitimately have a right to say, if we're not going to be doing these things together, then, maybe we'll reconsider funding it.
Yes, but you can't. The fact is, Donald Trump didn't consult anyone before doing this.
He didn't give anybody any warning, so it was impossible for any European nation to join up from the beginning. Now, I completely understand the reasons for that, because you do have to keep military operations secret. But you can't then whinge that other countries aren't supporting you when, frankly, you haven't done what George Bush did in 1990. You haven't done what George W. Bush did in 2001 and actually brought your allies on side.
Yes and no, and I think I agree with part of what you're saying, that, but we don't know, as regular Joe on the street. We don't really know what's going on in back channels, and we don't know what's going on in discussions. We don't know if Keir Starmer has had discussions, but asked for some concessions in terms of PR and the optics. We don't know that. I know, for example. Some nations say we're not participating, yet they'll have a hospital ship in the area. They'll have refueling supplies in the area. They are participating, but they're not publicly saying that they're participating. And I think a lot of that happens. And I kind of see what Trump has said as perhaps a little bit of politicking.
Well, perish the thought that a politician should politic. Patrick, thank you very much. Les says, NATO have been in a mess for a long time, Iain. How many members haven't paid their way, put their heads above the parapet, missing in action? Even the UK talks the talk, but still hasn't released its plans for the future of the armed forces. All nations have continuously kicked the can down the road, and now it's biting them in the bum. Well, you're correct up to a point there, Les, but many European nations have increased the amount that they're spending on defence. Many European nations have actually overtaken the UK. We were the number 2 contributor to NATO. We're now something like number 12. And many other countries have now exceeded the 2% target, which was set many, many years ago. So you're half right there, Les, if I may say so. Right, keep your calls coming. 0345 6060 973. It's 7:30 on LBC. Amelia Cox has the news headlines.
Donald Trump says a state visit from the King next month will be terrific, despite lashing out at the UK moments before it was confirmed. The US president has told Britain to get its own oil as he continues to take offence at Sir Keir Starmer's refusal to enter the wider war against Iran. The UK is sending more troops and military equipment to the Gulf to help nations there defend against Iranian attacks. Air defence systems are being deployed in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain and Kuwait. And a dog owner will be sentenced next month after being found guilty of owning a dog which killed a man in Cheshire. 84-year-old John McCall died of his injuries a month after being attacked by the XL bully in Warrington in February last year. LBC weather mainly dry across the UK tonight. Some spells of rain for western Scotland, lows of 2 degrees.
This is LBC.
You've probably been with the same energy supplier for decades. And why wouldn't you be? Loyalty matters. But lately, bigger hasn't always felt better. You've probably dealt with long waits and endless automated menus in search of someone who can actually help. Octopus Energy is now Britain's biggest energy supplier, trusted by over 8 million customers, because we do things differently. Our people focus on the most important thing, you. When you call, you'll speak to a real person. No robotic scripts, no computer says no, just an honest conversation with someone who actually wants to help. Join the millions who've already made the move. Octopus Energy, recommended by Which? A record 9 years running. Visit octopus.energy/better for verification.
If you were missold a home on a holiday park, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive compensation. Text ADVICE to 78900.
JP Morgan Personal Investing gives you the clarity to make more informed decisions on your investments, which is great because right now something else just became crystal clear. Your kid just outgrew the kids menu. Now he's ordering a truffle gnocchi? You consider making a don't gnocchi it till you try it joke, but now's not the time. Now's the time to grow his world, one bite at a time. Search JP Morgan Personal Investing. Invest with clarity. Capital at risk.
Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:33 on LBC. We'll come back to your calls in just a second, but first let me tell you who's on Cross Question tonight. Will Forster is Liberal Democrat MP for Woking. Zoe Williams is columnist for The Guardian. Albie Ancona is political commentator and campaigner and vice chair of the LGBT Conservatives campaign group. We have had a dropout though, so Corey and Chris are working like eager beavers to find a fourth panellist before 8 o'clock. Will they succeed? The tension is mounting, ladies and gentlemen. Right, we are going to continue with your calls on. Well, we're speculating about the future of NATO after yet more insulting comments about Britain and indeed France by President Trump today. Do you think the NATO alliance is in danger of fracturing? If it did, what would the consequences be? Is it something that we really need to get our heads around? Some people will say, well, this is an argument for a single European defence force. I've never really bought into that. I'm all in favour of closer cooperation with other European countries. But would that really work? Should there be some sort of European NATO? Jeffrey's in Harrow. Hello, Jeffrey.
Yeah, hi, good evening. 2 or 3 points, really. First of all, I just want to say the quality of the contributions you've had up to now have been absolutely superb. I thought all the listeners are like that. You're very lucky. That's terrific.
Well, we've had a good run. We had some brilliant calls on last night too.
Sorry?
We had some brilliant calls on last night too, so we're on a roll.
I'm sure you did. I greatly agreed with the analysis of Daniel Freed, the Undersecretary chap from America. I thought that was spot on. Namely that, sorry to use the word, you may have to cut it off, but even if Trump is an arsehole, he's nevertheless the man in charge, and we've got to take what he said seriously. He's been elected as President of the United States, and he's a man of action as well. And I think the point is we should not lose sight of the fundamental reasons for the war, which was the threat of Islamic Shiite, very particular Shiite imperialism, with an Iran that's going to grow itself into a world power, similar to the potential of Nazi Germany, in my view, at the Second World War. And the sort of decisions that the Europeans have got to make is not whether Trump is rude to them or not, which he is, of course, and I'm sorry about that. It's not my responsibility. But the question is, are they going to appease Iran's threat with a nuclear power, missiles, the whole lot, proxy invasions some of the invasions. And I would remind the listeners and yourself, if I may, it was Israel, actually, that launched a war against Iran of its own accord in June of last year. And America virtually followed suit by, I thought, sort of, rather brought to shame, and then used their bombs on the Iranian reactors. So there's a lot of points there, but the main point, I think, is that Shiite Iranian imperialism has got to be challenged, and that is what America's doing, and I think the West should support it.
But clearly that support hasn't been forthcoming, and do you think that endangers NATO?
It's up to NATO to get its act together, and it's very difficult. You can understand exactly why NATO's the way it is, because we all live quite happily with higher standards of living, thinking the sort of war that we thought would finish with the Second World War would never reoccur. All deeply shocked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and deeply more shocked by the Middle East going to the level that it has. So we're left in an terribly embarrassing position defence-wise, very embarrassing indeed, and it's not something that can be repaired tomorrow morning. It takes years to build armaments of any quality and so on and so on and so on. You know all that. So we're in a mess.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Ukraine there, because that was an example of NATO countries coming together, including the United States, and they were very, very unified. I think there was one or two who were slightly more dubious, shall we say. But when Trump became president, he basically withdrew American support from, or any meaningful support from...
I don't know the Ukraine in detail, but my impression is that the support for Ukraine was very much tying their hands behind their back. We'll give you weapons, but you mustn't use them to attack mainland Russia or metropolitan Russia. You can only use them.
But my point in raising that was that this works both ways. If America complains that other NATO countries haven't come to its support over what's happening in Iran, well, perhaps European NATO countries would like a little bit more support from America over the war in Ukraine. I'm sure Ukraine would. Jeffrey, thank you. Habib is in Cambridge. Habib, hi.
Oh, hi. Thank you for having me. Just going back on, I'm trying to be focused on the question, which is about the NATO and the alliance. The alliance is obviously a defensive alliance. It's not we're not supposed to be an aggressive alliance. This is a war of aggression, and it's according to
all wars are wars of aggression.
Well, at least our Prime Minister doesn't feel and has, felt that this is an illegal war, and I don't think there is any. Therefore, there is no legal justification. I mean, you can just about read Donald Trump's tweets that he's going from a normal conversation to a war threats of war crimes, hitting the Iranian infrastructure, etc. So I think that there is no question that what the UK and NATO has done so far has been the right thing to do. But this is not the first time. Donald Trump started to pull out support from President Zelensky. He embarrassed him in White House. Now he's embarrassing the NATO country leaders, and therefore this is not the first one. Then he went to over the issue of Greenland. This is now Iran, and I don't think that in order to appease Donald Trump, we have to join on an illegal war to show our allegiance with the leader of the Western world. That's not the right thing to do. I think the right thing to do is for the leaders of the Western world to actually encourage him to stop doing that and think about an exit strategy which involves obviously peace, which he doesn't really, even though he claims himself to be the one, but he actually isn't. He's just an aggressor so far. So NATO has to learn to. Well, they have tried to somehow stand for the last two challenges, which was Ukraine and Greenland, but they have to do exactly the same thing in this one. I mean, I think the stand of NATO towards Ukraine was probably the best, and also the Greenland. They were firm on that, and I think that this is the only thing you can do with the types of bully. I mean, I've heard, and there was a gentleman from US that called, and the previous one. All of these people are. I mean, the last caller invented a new terminology, because Iranian Shia imperialism. We really need to stop doing that. And
well, it's quite accurate, isn't it?
I've never ever heard of that.
Well, I've never heard of the phrase before. But when you look at the Iranian influence on Lebanon and Yemen, I think it's perfectly reasonable description.
You think so? You think that the Iranian Shia imperialism is we need to use that terminology? This is.
I don't see anything wrong with it. No.
Iran is not an empire. This is not an empire. I mean, okay, people use these.
Well, it's a country that wants to basically annihilate Israel. So, I mean, I suppose that's the opposite of an empire.
Now, being annihilated is actually Iran, and the one who's doing it is Israel. They're bombing schools, they're bombing pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies, power stations, water salination. Who is annihilating the other one? It's obviously
Iran has been funding Israeli annihilation for the last 30 years.
Well, but in reality, a lot of it is actually rhetorical, and this is what.
No, it's not. You haven't seen all of the missiles that have been going from Iran into Israel for decades.
But have you not seen the missiles, and have you not even checked what's happening in southern Lebanon?
Of course I have. Don't insult my intelligence. Pardon?
I said, have you ever mentioned southern Lebanon and what's happening in South Lebanon?
Yes, we've talked about it quite often over the last few weeks.
Yes, so if you look at that, just watch what IDF is doing to the people.
I'm not defending.
Who is Israel? Who is talking about Great Israel? When was the last?
Well, people like you
mentioned Great Iran. Who is the one who is pursuing?
Do you deny that Iran has been funding terrorism, not just in the Middle East, but sort of far beyond that over the last 30 years?
I think that what Iran has been doing is just trying to stop Israel attacking their country and to divide the country into the multiple ones. That's what they're planning to do.
Israel had never attacked Iran until over many, many years, Iranian-funded terrorists were attacking Israel and killing Israelis. That's what provoked Israel to respond.
Mossad agents have been very active in meddling with Iran. You forgot that the majority of the West was with Saddam Hussein during the 8-year war. This is not a new thing, Ian, and you know that. And there is no such a thing as Iranian Shia imperialism, I can assure you that. Just ask some of
you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong.
Well, I think you are wrong, actually.
Okay, well, we can agree. We're both wrong then.
Just all you need to do is to speak to a few professors of the Middle East, and
I'll tell you what. I talk to Iranians all the time on this program, and without exception, over the last month, without exception, they want to see the end of the Iranian regime. Why would that be?
Well, because they're particular people. They are the people who are not happy, and this is why they ended up in the West. All you need to do is 90 million people live in Iran. Some of them are happy, some of them are not happy. There are the ones who would do all they can, and even their lives, to keep the regime. Do you not realize that? Do you not realize that?
I'm sure there are some, but you think they're the majority, do you?
I think actually there are the majority.
Utterly delusional.
I think they are the majority, but all you need.
So you think the majority of people are happy to keep a regime that just murdered 40,000 of their own citizens because they had the temerity to protest?
The majority of people are happy to keep the regime than to allow Israel to divide their country.
Why are so many people cheering Israel on then?
Iran would not like to be bullied, by Western or Israel or their alliances. And they will probably, most of them, there are people who live in the UK or the West who have never visited Iran for 40 years.
No, many of them have come. Many of them have flown Iran because of the regime, because they feared for their lives.
I agree with that. But these are not the majority. They are the sort of the small dissident groups that are.
No, they're not small dissident groups. There's thousands of them.
Well, most of them are, unfortunately, as I said, not happy. That's why they left. And we give them asylum in the UK. We give them asylum in Canada. We give them asylum in the US. And that's how they... But look at some of their protests. That they're mostly... they also have some abhorrent fascist ideology.
Oh, my
they hate
goodness.
Islam, don't they?
No, they don't. I actually passed in Whitehall, coming to the studio this afternoon. I passed 2 protests. There was one opposite Downing Street where they were chanting obscenities and looked very aggressive. And this was all the sort of Free Palestine lot. And then further up Whitehall, there was an admittedly smaller protest, which looked incredibly peaceful and well organised for freeing Iran.
I don't know why I feel, Ian, you're slightly biased, I'm afraid.
And you aren't? You aren't biased at all? I think you've demonstrated in this call you're incredibly biased.
I'm not biased, because I think you need to really study these groups a lot better. Don't
patronise me.
Them are fascists.
No, they're not.
You need to realise that.
Well, clearly you don't understand the meaning of the word fascism then.
Well, in that case, you also don't understand the meaning of the Iranian imperial.
I understand that term perfectly. I'd never heard it before today, but I understand exactly what the caller was talking about.
Yourself. You obviously feel that you know more about the Middle East than, for example, I do.
I haven't said that at all. I just disagree. I disagree fundamentally with virtually everything that you've said.
No, you disagree with me, but you are also saying that you know more than I do.
I didn't say that. You're putting words into my mouth which I didn't say.
Well, I didn't try to do that anyway, but I just felt that you see yourself somebody more.
I'll tell you what. I see myself as somebody who stands fundamentally against the kind of fascism, as you call it, of the Iranian regime.
Some of the university professors.
I talk to university professors all the time on the show, which you well know if you listen. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Habib. It's 7:48.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Starmer's 48-hour ultimatum to doctors. In a moment, you'll have your opportunity to put your questions to our next guest, Sir Jim Mackey, who's Chief Executive Officer at NHS England. Let's get a doctor involved. Farouk is in Maidstone in Kent.
The main thing I'm concerned about is why are the training posts even being used for the bargaining job?
It's just the necessity of the thing being financially constrained. If we're paying money to cover strike action, the money has to come from somewhere.
Let's bring Farouk.
There's a prediction that by 2048 would be 11 to 15,000 consultants short based on population. I think in the media doctors are being painted as they just want more money, but actually the jobs is quite an important part too.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
When it comes to Easter eggs, why chocolate? Why not something fluffier? A #1 Millionaire's panettone egg with chocolate drops and oozing caramel. And why is chocolate only for eggs? #1 Berry Blush hot cross buns are packed with creamy white chocolate and juicy berries. Profound. Chocolate eggs are only the beginning. Indulge in a range of Easter treats at Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected stores subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and partners and concessions.
When the business hustle is on, when the boardroom drama hots up, when sales pitches really deliver results, or don't.
All that, and they made £3.
£3.13.
Oh yeah, that'll save them.
Nothing brings us together like great TV. And the TV license covers you to watch all TV channels so you can keep up with all the latest boardroom battles. Search TV license together.
You want your car in good hands. With expertise, Halfords will keep it moving this spring with ease. You want your annual service ticked off? That's great. And in store, we'll fit batteries while you wait. You're never far from a garage or store for fitting, fixing, checks and more. You want mobile experts to fit tyres on your drive while you relax and take 5 to keep moving forwards with none of the fuss. You want Halfords, the name you can trust. Full T's and C's and exclusions apply. See halfords.com for details.
Chase is the digital bank that gives you 1% cash back on groceries.
So, can I get cash back on cake mix?
Indeed.
And icing?
Yep.
And sprinkles?
Sure.
And candles?
Yeah, and you can turn all that cash back into a nice birthday treat.
How do you know it's my birthday?
Just a hunch. Get 1% cash back on groceries, fuel and everyday transport when you spend with Chase. Search Chase Bank. 18 plus UK residents. 1% cash back on this debit card spending for your first year. Maximum £15 per month. Eligibility and exceptions apply. May be changed or withdrawn.
Iain Dale on LBC.
7:50, just to remind you, we have Cross Question at 8 o'clock, so in just 10 minutes' time. We have Michelle Donnellan, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, with us, Will Forster, Liberal Democrat MP for Woking, Zoe Williams, columnist for The Guardian, and Albi Amankona, political commentator. So the lines are open for your calls. I'm not sure there's any lines left actually at the moment, so if you call now you won't get through, but if you leave it a couple of minutes, we'll take a couple of calls more on the future of NATO, and we'll then hear from you on Cross Question. Alison says, absolutely with you 100%, Ian. As a veteran, it makes me really angry. Starmer is our Prime Minister. No one deserves it. She means the abuse from Trump. Maybe the King should point out all the times we have helped the USA. Let's go to Dan, his first-time caller in Ramsgate. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Ian. So is NATO, is this the end of NATO? I think a couple of points. I think under a Trump government, NATO is severely weakened. Obviously, I think he treats his NATO allies quite badly. The whole Greenland fiasco and threats to annex Greenland, threats to annex Canada. So I can see why a lot of countries, sort of NATO allies, natural allies, are not wanting to get involved in the war. Also, legality-wise, it's, you know, are there human rights violations being committed by Israel and America? There's probably some compelling arguments. But I wanted to, my main point really for calling is I think the EU and other sort of NATO allies should be looking to...
And he's gone. I was waiting for him to get out the sentence, but he's gone. So let's go to Raphael in Slough. Hello, Raphael.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. What would you like to say?
First-time caller. Ian, I do agree with the previous caller in that Trump he's got 4 years. His term will be finished. And so we shouldn't look at NATO as just because Trump is trying to penalize and suppress all the other allies. So we should look at it in the sense that he's got 4 years. After 4 years, it's got to be a new American president with a new thinking and strengthen NATO again.
Well, I suppose it depends on who it is, doesn't it? Because if there's essentially a Trump disciple like J.D. Vance that takes over in 2029, Marco Rubio, I think he's drunk the Trump Kool-Aid a bit because he's had to. I suspect if he became president, things would revert to some degree of normality. But you can't rely on that, can you?
Well, I beg to differ with you on that because I think both Marco Rubio and Vance have to follow suit and 100% loyal to what Trump's objectives are. But deep down, and if you have a look at their history, they are really into one with Europe and into supporting the European countries, especially Vance. Vance is very well known for spending a lot of his time in Europe and actually strengthening Europe. So
well,
at the moment,
you're right. He does spend a lot of time here, but I wonder why he doesn't really understand European countries better if he spends so much time here.
Well, to be fair, Vance has been very quiet about the whole invasion into Iran. So we don't really know. I guess he can't come out and sort of disagree with Trump, especially now.
Well, no. Although the fact is, if you think about it, we haven't heard a lot from J.D. Vance over the last month, have we? Normally he's in front of the TV cameras all the time. I don't recall a single interview that I've seen him give in support of this war.
You're right, and I think that speaks volumes. I think that really he is holding back to see how everything pans out. At the moment, majority of Americans don't support the war, and he's trying to position himself to be the future president.
Well, you may be right on that. It is a very interesting position. Maybe we'll talk about that on another evening. Raphael, thank you. Omar's in Birmingham. Hello, Omar.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I think NATO and the countries that make it up, the majority, the European countries, ultimately acting within their interests. I think it's important to note that last year, in the midst of the last war, Netanyahu said explicitly, he said the ideal for Iran is the Libyan model. Now, why would someone say something like that when after the Libyan people, the Libyan model was most disastrous for European nations? It started the refugee crisis, just a nation of 4 million, the slave markets open, drugs running and weapons running. And then at the same time, in the West Bank, a settler asked Smotrich, they asked him about the refugees from this war, and his reply was that Europe is going to take them. And this is something which they've been talking about openly. So I think that NATO and Europe in general, they understand that ultimately they are going to bear the brunt of this war, while at the same time the US and Israel are going to benefit from it, whether it's in terms of weapons sales or imperialistic ambitions. Even in the last hour, Netanyahu, he had I don't know if it's finished now, but he had a live conference in Jerusalem. And he said that this war is for our future, and that the aim is to make them he said, a regional or global power. So I think the people in Europe, the politicians, they understand very well that they're going to be bordered with countries, a land border of dysfunctional nations. So Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. These are all adjacent to each other. And if you think about a refugee crisis with 90 million people, that's just Iran. And if they decide if the war spreads regionally and causes dysfunctionality in Saudi Arabia and all the other neighboring states, I don't think Turkey, like in the last refugee crisis, is going to be willing to host so many displaced people. And even in terms of energy, Europe is going to be the one that is going to lose out the most. Donald Trump has made it very clear they don't need the oil, they don't need the energy. So I think he is ultimately holding NATO at ransom to do as they're told, while at the same time planning to, it seems, now he has an excuse to pull out, leave Europe with the mess. And we also know from himself and from the rest of his cabinet and administration, they're not very keen on the war in Ukraine either. So they would essentially leave NATO with two fronts. Donald Trump can say we've done the best or we've done our most. We're not the ones that are going to benefit. It's up to Europe, etc. And also something else is...
No, Omar, we've reached the end of the hour, I'm afraid. Apologies, because I always like hearing your calls. Thank you very much indeed for this one. Finally, our first ever YouTube comment from the LBC YouTube channel. I'm going to read this one out from Comrie. The US is not the entirety of NATO. NATO existed before the US entered it. No, it didn't. Just like the EU existed before the UK, and the EU didn't collapse upon our leaving. That is true, but America is the dominant party in NATO. I'm not sure the analogy works there. Right, coming up on Cross Question, we will be joined by former Conservative Cabinet Minister Michelle Donnellan, Will Forster, Liberal Democrat MP for Woking, Zoe Williams, columnist for The Guardian, and Albi Amankona, political commentator and the Vice Chair of the LGBT Conservative Campaign Group. They're here to answer your questions. The board has been cleared. 0345 6060 973. If you want to put a question, you can WhatsApp on that number. You can text 84850. And of course, you can watch us on the LBC app, the Global Player, and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the Defence Secretary says he's not worried about the King getting embarrassed during next month's state visit to the US. Donald Trump's criticisms of the UK's response to the Iran war had led to calls for the trip to be cancelled. He says it's terrific Charles and Camilla are coming over to see him. Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey thinks the US president is being unfairly rewarded.
He's insulted our country, insulted our troops. He's undermined our economy with his tariffs and this illegal war, which is putting up people's petrol prices and energy bills and mortgage costs.
Meanwhile, the King and Queen are not expected to meet survivors of Jeffrey Epstein during their state visit. It's understood they're unable to while UK police investigations continue. The Defence Secretary has announced extra British troops will be sent to the Middle East to help UK allies. Additional support has been sent to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain and Kuwait. A dog owner has been found guilty of owning an XL bully dog which attacked and killed an elderly man. 84-year-old John McCall died after being mauled in Warrington in February last year. LBC's Liam Gotting has more from Liverpool Crown Court.
30-year-old Sean Garner's family pet Torito, an XL bully, had to be shot 10 times by police following the attack on 84-year-old John McCall. The court heard that the seemingly confused pensioner mistakenly entered the wrong driveway in Warrington while on his way home from the pub. The first officers on the scene were unarmed and were unable to get to the victim as the court heard the dog guarded him as if he was prey or food.
The Home Secretary has signed a 2-month extension to the current beach patrol deal with France. The existing near £500 million arrangement was due to end at midnight. Shabana Mahmoud said it stopped 42,000 attempts by people to make the journey across the Channel. NASA says there's an 80% chance of launching the first manned mission towards the moon in more than 50 years tomorrow. 4 astronauts will spend 10 days in space, circling the moon before returning to Earth. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 48 points at 10,176. The pound buys $1.31 and €1.14. LBC weather mainly dry across the UK tonight. Some spells of rain for western Scotland, lows of 2. A band of rain pushing across northern areas tomorrow, mostly dry in the south with a mixture of cloud and sunny spells and highs of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Katie Dartford.
I've looked after my kids since they were born. Now they've got kids. I still want to look after them. I don't want them struggling to make decisions about my money or my health if I can't. So we made a lasting power of attorney. Now, if I can't speak for myself, they'll speak for me. It's a weight off for all of us, isn't it?
Yes, Mum. Lasting power of attorney. Search your voice, your decision.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8 on LBC. Welcome to Tuesday's Cross Question. Joining me on the panel today, we have to my left, we have Michelle Donlan, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. She is a late entry, as they say, and thank you so much for stepping into the breach. Our previous book guest had to drop out through illness. Next to her is Will Forster, Liberal Democrat MP for Woking, making his debut on the programme, so we've been very kind to you on your first programme, Will. To my right, Zoe Williams, who's come in penitent mood, haven't you, Zoe? Why would that be?
I feel terrible because I got the wrong week the last time I was meant to be in, and the first I knew of that was when I heard you on the radio saying, I wonder where she is.
We forgive you. And next to Zoe is Albie Amankona, political commentator and vice chair of the LGBT Conservative Campaign Group. Right, 0345 6060973. If you would like to put a question to the panel, you can WhatsApp on that number. You can text 84850. And of course, you can watch on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel. Not only can you watch on the YouTube channel now, we're going to take questions. So if you're watching live on YouTube and you want to put a question to the panel, just put it in the comments and Corey or Chris will, if it's a good question, will give it to me and we'll read it out to our panel. That's called engagement, Zoe.
You sound so impressed by your own technological expertise.
Well, I'm always terribly impressed when we do something for the first time. Right, let's continue with your questions.
0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's go to Scott in West Hampstead. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Ian. Good evening, panel. Has Donald Trump completely lost the plot with his grossly offensive comments about the UK and our European neighbours? And how should Sir Keir Starmer, and indeed the King, respond to this barrage of criticism?
It's always a great question, read in a very good Scottish accent, I think. Zoe, let's start with you.
Well, it begs the question, what's the King going to do when he goes over there? Because there is absolutely no sign that Donald Trump is going to rein it in his remarks about Starmer or Europe, or indeed the King himself. You never know what he's going to say. A lot of people are saying, you know, he's been to far more dictatorial regimes in the past. He had to go and see Ceausescu. But all of those regimes that he went to, they were sane. They didn't just come out with any old thing. They reined it in for the purpose, for the duration of the diplomatic visit. If he's walking into that kind of nest of vipers, not knowing whether Donald Trump is going to slate Keir Starmer or praise him, not knowing whether he's going to declare war on Denmark or declare peace, it puts him in a situation which nothing in his diplomatic portfolio would have prepared him for. In terms of whether he's jumped the shark, it's impossible to tell, and I think a waste of headroom to try and figure out whether he means it, whether he's crazy, whether he's playing everyone, whether he's just trying to set us all a tumble so that we don't talk about anything else. It's impossible to tell. And really, all European leaders have to find a way through that isn't constantly trying to do Trumpology, because it's a waste of a decent adult's headspace.
Oh, shall we move on then? Michelle Donlan.
So I think Trump now is beginning to sound like a petulant child in the playground, across with somebody that is trying to hold the rest of the world's economy to ransom. And that's becoming very apparent. But to the listener's question about what should Keir Starmer actually do, I think the worst thing he could do would be to not engage. I think it is the right move that the King is still proceeding and is going to the United States, because we do need to maintain that relationship. And the special relationship is bigger than just one person. Trump is the president at the moment. It's very strained, but he's not going to be the president forever. And so we do need to have a long-term view on this, despite the rhetoric that is coming out. But I also think, is anybody really surprised? This is all very usual for Trump to keep flip-flopping on things, changing his opinion, to also use bravado and to try and push people to act in the way he wants them to act. So to a certain extent, it's losing its impact because people just expect it.
It was interesting today, and I don't know whether this is cock-up or conspiracy, but Trump's post about Britain, or his insulting post to Britain today, was posted literally within minutes of the official announcement of the King going to America. Now, I'd like to think that was cock-up, but I can't say I'm 100% sure.
Yeah, I noted that too. It was a bit unusual for the two to collide in such an awkward way. But I think you're right. I think it probably was cock-up rather than,
Will Forster.
I think Scott's criticism of Donald Trump's completely right. This man seems like he's on another planet. He's incredibly insulting about British but whole NATO forces, whether that's with our commitment to it in Afghanistan, saying that we just weren't there. He's called the Royal Navy ships toys. He's been incredibly insulting, and I think Keir Starmer needs to grow a backbone and cancel the state visit.
It's a bit late now. They've just announced it.
Well, we've said that the Liberal Democrats said that the visit shouldn't have gone ahead for some time. I think it should be cancelled.
You think it should be cancelled even though it's just been announced?
Well, we said it shouldn't have gone ahead.
You still think it should be cancelled now?
Yes, it shouldn't be. Donald Trump respects bullies. He respects tough men. He is a bully himself. We need to show that strength. And I haven't seen any strength from Keir Starmer on the foreign policy stage since he took to office. This state visit is meant to be about the 250th anniversary of American independence. That's in July. Why is the visit happening now? Donald Trump is going to try to use the King, use the state visit for his own political agendas. And I don't think we should allow that.
Albie?
Donald Trump being very bonkers and very batty is not a new thing. The question is what have British politicians done about it since we've actually realised how crazy he is? And the answer is not very much. Keir Starmer has made announcements about increasing defence spending, but actually in the financial statements that we've heard so far, it's not clear how we're going to meet those new targets that have been set. I don't actually think the targets that have been set for near the end of the decade are really anywhere near high enough. We look at what's going on in the Baltic states, we look at what's going on in Poland. I think they're taking this issue a lot more seriously. Across Europe, we need to be a lot more serious about being independent from the United States of America, just in case they elect someone else just as crazy as Donald Trump. And I don't really see the right level of seriousness when it comes to approaching those issues, whether or not they're security issues to do with defence spending, economic issues to becoming more economically independent of the US. I don't see Europe grappling those issues at all. We're still following.
Do you see your own party leader grappling with those issues?
No, I don't think Kemi Badenoch is doing anywhere near a good enough job. I don't think Nigel Farage is doing anywhere near a good enough job. I don't think the right has really struck the right tone here. And we need to be doing better. It's not a right or left issue. We need to be a lot more independent in our thinking in the UK. And that might actually mean, look, I'm a Brexiteer, I supported Brexit. I don't think we should go back into the European Union, but it might mean more cooperation when it comes to military among the European military powers of France and the UK. We know Germany is rearming, and also the Eastern European states that are taking this military threat very seriously.
Albie, you're right. A lot of Europe has stepped up to the plate and started to invest in their defence. I think we need to follow that as well. So I do think we do need more European cooperation. You've been very critical of your own leadership, which I think that's really, really good of you. Surely this is an issue where we need cross-party consensus to genuinely...
What is the Lib Dems' position on defence spending?
Well, what I've just been saying, we need to increase our defence spending, but actually some of this, the world has changed radically. Do you think we need that cross-party consensus? Do you think all the political parties can come together to work out on a plan where we do increase defence spending?
But I think that's not really how things work, though, is it? Because everybody will agree and say, yeah, we need more money in defence. And if you don't, you'd be bonkers, quite frankly, looking at how volatile the world is. The question is where you get that money from, and that's where the differences will be. So therefore, cross-party negotiations on this would break down quite quickly.
But don't you think parties would want to put their partisan blinders behind them?
Where are you going to get the money from?
Well, we've suggested how we would increase our defence spending a fair bit, not to the full 3%. And that's why I think we need that cross-party consensus. The Liberal Democrats, with Ed Davey, has talked about cross-party consensus to invest in social care. Surely we need the same level of approach to defence.
Just Lib Dem thing to say, let's have cross-party consensus, all hold hands and come up with a defence policy. There was a similar thing when it came to Brexit, and the Remainers who didn't want to leave the European Union thought they could all come up with some plan to stay in. It didn't work. That is not how our parliamentary system works. It's a lot more adversarial. And actually what I would like to see are a lot more serious plans, especially coming from the left of British politics. The Tories and Reform have been very clear about how they would get the money for defence spending. They would cut welfare.
The left knows.
Whereas with Labour and the Greens, how are they going to get there?
That's actually very unfair. What you're doing is conflating Labour and the Greens, and they've never been further apart. And you're calling Labour the left, and they've never been less left. The Greens are really clear.
Well, I wish they'd be more right.
I'm not sure that's true.
Well, no, it's definitely true. I mean, they're not recognisable as a left-wing party. They might not be a competent right-wing party, but they're not recognisable as a left-wing party. That's not the point anyway. The point is the Greens are really clear on this. They would get the money from nuclear disarmament, because at the moment you've got a disproportionate amount going into weapons that
time to get rid of nuclear weapons.
Well, I know, but Iain, you say that, but actually no democracy would ever use a nuclear weapon because nobody wants to incinerate their children.
But
or
we're not fighting against democracy. We're fighting against Russia and Iran.
Well, yeah, but they're fighting against us too, though, aren't they? So
exactly, which is why we need to have strong defences.
Look, this is not an argument about nuclear disarmament, although I'm happy to have that argument. I'm happy. Well, no, you asked me what the Greens would do about military spending, and the way to spend more on the military, land armies, navies, they hate nuclear weapons, and I'll tell you why. It's because once you spend it on Trident, you haven't got any more money left, and that's what's going on, and that's what the Greens, even though most of them are pacifists, have a much more realistic plan for boosted military spending than any of the rest of you, who are all like, well, I'm going to take it from social care. Well, I'm going to take it from benefits. That's not going to touch the sides.
Have you become a Green?
No, I haven't. No,
You're doing a blimmin' good impression of one.
I'm still an anarcho-syndicalist. How many times? No, not really.
Right, we've got another question to come on a similar theme, so we'll wait until after the break for that. It's 8:15.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
This is a shambles.
Straight to the point.
How was that allowed to happen?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Show some evidence, Minister.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, what you thought you were getting may not be what you ended up with. From unexpected site fee increases, running costs, a huge depreciation in value, many owners feel they've been missold. If you think this might be you, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive the compensation you're entitled to. Text ASSIST to 78900 to find out more. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Spring has sprung. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and save 25% at Waitrose. Perhaps a citrusy Lamonette Agave, perfect with halloumi, fresh off the BBQ? Or Esprit de Puissigan with notes of ripe red berry. And maybe go all out with a crisp bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne. Cheers to spring. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and fizz and save 25%. Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected stores online. Subject to availability. Excludes Scotland box wines and bottles price £6 or under, £100 or over.
Imagine you in a nice comfy seat, with your hands behind your head, taking in the views, instead of taking on the road, maybe even taking a nap. That's the bliss of getting where you need to go without worrying about driving. Book your train journey via abantywestcoast.co.uk and we'll take you there. Avanti West Coast. Feel good travel.
Cross Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
17 minutes past 8. We're very amused by Gordon's text who says, Ian, why are the LGB community so aggressive? I think that's a little dig at you, Albie.
But I think he thinks...
Am I being aggressive?
I think he thinks I'm also in the LGBTQ community and then he's rolled us into one. I don't think it's your fault.
Well,
I think it's
I can be aggressive when I need to be.
What you find on this
I had a hard
programme...
time at school.
What you find on this programme is it's everybody's fault. Because somebody somewhere on a WhatsApp or text will find fault with all of you, and in particular me. Right, we have a question from Martin here. Trump hates European democracies and our system in Britain. He doesn't understand democracy. He's accusing us of not supporting the US in the war against Iran and holding this against us, so that when Russia extends its war against Europe, he won't feel committed to reciprocating and supporting us, and will remind us, you didn't support us in the war against Iran, so we won't come running to your assistance in the war against Russia. Does the panel think Trump and Putin want to see the breakup of the EU and share the spoils between them? Will Forster.
I've always been very, very critical of Donald Trump so far. I also think this government is not standing up to him. He does respect strength, and I do find it terrifying that he's so pally with President Putin. Almost this time last year, I was in Ukraine, seeing the devastating impact of that war. The fact that when Trump met Putin, he didn't raise Ukraine at all in the last visit. He wasn't talking about the 20,000 kidnapped children. It's absolutely heartbreaking and heartless. Our government needs to grow a backbone and stand up to him properly.
Do you think that Putin wants to see the breakup of the EU?
Well, I think Putin wants to see the breakup of NATO and the EU, and I worry both Putin and Trump want to tear up the world order that has actually made this world and this country relatively prosperous and safe. The last couple of years has been so dangerous. We've got more wars, more conflict than any time since 1945. That's not a time to break down the established world order, the rule of law.
Michelle, do you think that, to take the question's point here, if we did come under attack from Russia, do you think that if we asked NATO to invoke Article 5, do you think Trump would say, well, no, I'm not going to do that?
No, I think a lot of this is bravado and words, and he's throwing his toys out the pram now because he expected that he was going to launch this war and everybody would follow, and they haven't done. And his pollings are declining in the US. He's seen the effect it's having on the global economy and the pressure domestically as well. And he's getting agitated and hoping that he can persuade people to follow him and change course. So, of course, if something dramatic, as you've outlined, happened, of course he would be on board. And I think some of this is
say
rhetoric.
Of course. I don't think that's necessarily true.
So I think Trump is many things, but he's also quite strategic when he wants to be, and he understands the risk that would pose to the United States as well. And he might not jump for joy at the prospect of supporting people, but he would see what's in it for the US, because that's always what he motivates.
But what is, for example, Will's colleague Mike Martin, the MP for Tunbridge Wells, he has said that he thinks that what might happen is if Russia, say, invaded one of the Baltic states, and British troops are based in Estonia, say that happens. It's not. It could happen, and Keir Starmer rings up Donald Trump and says, right, Article 5 needs to be invoked, and Donald Trump says, but why? And because Russia has invaded Estonia. Where's Estonia? Why would I be interested in Estonia? I mean, you can see this could happen.
Well, and he could change his mind 40 times before the morning, as we've seen happen over the last few weeks on various things, right the way through from Greenland. I think it is plausible, but I think that he would eventually recognise that actually the US is a very integral, as he has made and laboured, part of NATO. And as he said himself, without the US, NATO is a very different entity. If any entity at all. So he would have to come in and support. But there'd be a quid pro quo. Everything that Trump does is about what's in it for Trump, what's in it for America. So I'm not saying that he would come to our aid without an ask, but I think that there would be some realism and some recognition that he can't just leave us to it.
So, well, Britain could become America's 51st state on that basis. He says, well, that's my deal. We'll rescue you, but you need to, instead of Greenland, we'll go for you.
Oh, I'm sure he'd probably start high and we'd have to bring him down.
Albie.
Well, if that meant American levels of economic growth, there might be some on the right who might be quite happy about that, or American energy prices, for example. But I don't want the UK to become the 51st state of the United States of America, although I wish our economy looked more like the American economy than the German economy, for example. But on the point about whether or not I think that Putin and Trump want to see the EU deteriorate, which I think was a question, I've no doubt that Putin wants to see the West less strong, and if the EU broke up for whatever reason, I might have voted for Brexit. I don't want the end of the EU. That would be probably in Russia's favour. Do I think that Donald Trump wants the EU to break up? No, I don't. And I worry about like-for-like comparisons between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I don't particularly like Donald Trump. I like Putin even less, but they're not really comparable when it comes to world leaders and what they're doing. And I think we need to be careful when we're making like-for-like comparisons like that.
Sorry?
I don't know why we're being so tactful about this. I mean, it's obvious that Putin seeks the end of the EU. It's obvious that he's in direct opposition to NATO. It's obvious that he seeks the end of that power bloc. We saw it in the Russian support for Brexit, in both the dark Russian support and the open Russian support for the Brexit campaign, that his interests are in breaking up that regulatory environment, and that is because the weaker it is, the less it can resist what is plainly a land war of aggression, such as none of us were expecting. The EU has never been weaker, and every time Russia acts in this way, every time it acts and is not vanquished, the EU gets weaker still. It just does. Now, that's Putin. The thing with Donald Trump is we're all doing that Trumpology thing again. We're like, oh, 1 minute he says this, the next minute he says that. But actually, if you follow the through line since he became president, they are. You saw the Munich Security Conference, and this wasn't Trump, but this was Vance and other members of the administration, basically haranguing all European nations, haranguing us about our immigration policy, haranguing us about our civilization, haranguing us about our freedom of speech. Yeah. This is all right-wing playbook to try and destabilize normal social democratic governments, and with a long game, I would argue, of destabilizing large bloc regulatory environments that do things like subdue tech billionaires and subdue fossil fuel. And
some of our commenters on YouTube, who are watching on YouTube, they agree with you.
Well, okay,
Marcus says, nothing would please Putin more than the breakup of the EU. Kevin agrees, saying Nigel Farage, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump all want to dismantle it. It's all part of the Brexit plan. I thought there was never a Brexit plan. I thought that was part of the problem.
Well, there was a Brexit plan. It's just not all of you guys were told what it was.
I don't think... Anyway, that's another discussion. And Stu says, I'll take a bet that Iain Dale liked lizard truss. No, Liz Truss's screwed worldview. Well, you'd lose your money then, Stu, I have to say, because even before she became Prime Minister, and certainly while she was Prime Minister, I did nothing but criticise her, not just her worldview as well. Right, another question from, this is from Barry. Is it... No, sorry. No, that wasn't the one I thought we were going to. It must have been deleted. Anyway, Barry says, is it time to ban doctors from striking? As we'll be discussing after 9 o'clock this evening, Sir Keir Starmer has told the British Medical Association that it needs to come to an agreement on resident doctors' pay by tomorrow night, or see the current offer withdrawn. Well, not just that, he's saying that he'll abolish 4,500 training posts for doctors, which... Zoe, it's brinkmanship, which I wouldn't have necessarily expected from someone like Keir Starmer.
I wouldn't have expected it either, and I wonder whether he's finally found the people he thinks he can go toe-to-toe with, because he thinks, I would recognise a load of doctors, I bet they're similar to me, and they're also quite kind of spotty, and they're not going to... Spotty.
What's that mean?
Well, it kind of means a bit swatty.
Okay.
Because it's kind of ridiculous, and I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to stop them going on the path they're going. Fundamentally, the principle of withdrawing your labour if you don't get your terms met is that I don't think you can say no. I don't think you can ban any segment of society from doing it.
Well, we can, and we have.
I mean, okay,
plenty of groups that are banned from striking.
You actually can, but I don't think you should. I don't think you should, because certainly, generally speaking, doctors figure it out themselves. They don't leave emergency care posts unfilled. They're grown-ups, but the principle of being able to withdraw your labour if you feel like your terms and conditions are being eroded, I think is the correct one, because we've seen across every single public sector job and across quite a few private sector jobs that if you don't use that power that you have, your terms and conditions do go down all the time.
Okay, Albie?
I think the doctors are taking the mick now, to be honest. I want to say something a lot stronger than that, but I won't. They have received essentially the pay rise that they wanted before, or a number very close to it. And now they're going on strike again because of cost of living pressures. Well, everyone's facing cost of living pressures. I also note that MPs got a 5% pay rise as well. I don't agree with that either, by the way. 3%?
I don't think...
I don't think... Well, £3,300
but it's not. No, it's not.
Is the extra money that they've got. Will, how much more are you getting paid next year?
Do you want me to come in? So it is a 3.5%, which is set not by MPs, but set by IPSA.
That's a good guess. But do you think you should be having above inflation pay rise?
I want to vote on lots of things to represent Woking. One of the only things I don't want to vote on is my own pay. We saw in the expenses scandal when MPs started to vote on their pay, set their own pay, it was an absolute disaster. So I don't spend any time thinking about it.
I don't. Look, you're derailing it. The fact is, they're not striking about cost of living pressures. They're striking about the cost of living pressures created by the way their debt is structured, which is really absurd. There is no other debt in the country where you could take it on under one kind of term and then it be changed.
So you're talking about student loans now. I'm on a Plan 2 student loan.
Are you?
I can't just go on strike and then not pay my student loan off every month. I mean, it's a lot of money. I understand why these junior doctors who are the same age as me, are annoyed, because I do think we're being used as cash cows to pay for the triple lock on pensions, to pay for people on welfare. Yeah. I get that, but lots of people are feeling that way, and I think for the junior doctors to continue to go on strike as if they're the only people who feel the way that they do, I don't think it's acceptable.
Okay, Michelle. We're getting close to the news.
Yeah,
Michelle.
But it isn't just because of the loans. The union have come out and said because of the Iran war and the cost of living that actually we need a higher package. Well, everybody is facing that. And do our doctors do an incredible job? Absolutely. Do they have a huge responsibility and work insane hours? Yes, but let's look at what they've actually been given. So a resident doctor, the top end of a junior doctor, is going to be on £100,000. A junior doctor starting out is £52,000. That's up £12,000 in the last 3 years. And we're talking about striking at a time that is around the Easter break. There's already shortages in staff. That the head of the NHS was on TV today saying that he's very worried about shortages of equipment too because of the Iran war. So our NHS is being asked to take a heck of a lot of hits here. And who's going to suffer? The British public, because they won't get the right adequate care. And if it means that, somebody's mother or grandmother or is going to be put in a precarious position, that's not okay, is it? We're talking about people's lives at the end of the day that are at risk because of this kind of activity.
So similar to Michelle, we've got to be thankful for the doctors, particularly what they did over the pandemic, but it's really irresponsible for the BMA to call a strike based on not getting
And they're calling the consultants out on strike
completely,
as well.
Because it's 26% pay increase they've asked for, because they've not got that. They've got they had a very good offer. They're going to go out on strike. That's so irresponsible. But it is shocking, as you highlighted earlier, that the Labour government is saying, well, we'll cancel training places as a punishment. We've got two sides taking extreme positions. People need to get round the table. so we can get the NHS back into a decent state. It's been in a mess, I'm afraid, where Michelle and I agree, because of Conservative mismanagement. I don't think Labour and the BMA chest beatings is going to help rescue it either.
But on that cancelling of the places, I think Keir Starmer's got himself into a right old pickle, because how is he really going to actually pull those places? I mean, he's not actually damaging the doctors, he's damaging the offer to the British public as well. And I think that is a card he shouldn't have tried to pull.
Right, more questions to our panel in just a moment on LBC. It's 8:32 and Katie Dartford has the news headlines.
Donald Trump's welcomed an announcement that the King and Queen will make a state visit to the US next month, calling it terrific. But hours earlier, he criticised the UK and other countries which didn't partake in strikes on Iran. Meanwhile, the King and Queen are not expected to meet survivors of Jeffrey Epstein during the visit. It's understood they're unable to while UK police investigations continue. A dog owner has been convicted after his XL bully attacked and killed an elderly man in Cheshire. 84-year-old John McCall died from his injuries a month after wandering into the driveway of Sean Garner's home in Warrington in February last year. And Tottenham Hotspur have appointed Roberto De Zerbi as their new head coach. He's Spurs' third manager of the season and takes over with them a point clear of the Premier League's relegation zone with 7 games left. LBC weather mainly dry across the UK tonight. Some spells of rain for Western Scotland, lows of 2 degrees.
This is LBC.
The Paramount Plus spring sale is on, with over 60% off Paramount Plus. Sign up to stream every episode of exclusive shows like the critically acclaimed hit Landman, brand new series The Madison, starring Michelle Pfeiffer and Kurt Russell, and new Yellowstone series Marshals. All for only $2.99 a month, only on Paramount Plus. But hurry, offer ends Tuesday. Standard monthly plan only for eligible customers, saving when compared to the full regular monthly price. After 2 months, auto renews at $7.99 a month unless cancelled. 18 plus, T's and C's apply.
Here's a tale of 2 commuters. Steve was in a rush and needed to park near the station. Jane also needed a space and booked in advance with Your Parking Space. Steve had a meeting at 9 and panic at 8. Nowhere to park. Jane, she's already in the office and enjoying that morning latte. With Your Parking Space, you can browse thousands of spaces across London and reserve the perfect one instantly. Get £10 off your first booking. Download the Your Parking Space app today. What's the best present you ever got for your birthday? I bet it wasn't as life-changing as £1 million. Every week with the birthday draw, there's £1 million to be won. And you can enter from as little as £1 or via post. And for this week only, we're also guaranteeing 5 winners of £20,000 in our bonus draw. Enter by midnight on Sunday to be in the draw. Visit thebirthdaydraw.com. Is it your lucky day? From Global and ITV. 18 plus, UK only, no purchase necessary.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:34. With us on the panel, Michelle Donlan, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Will Forster, Liberal Democrat MP for Woking, Zoe Williams, columnist for The Guardian, and Albie Amankona, political commentator and Vice Chair of the LGBT Conservative Campaign Group. Now, a WhatsApp question from Kieran in Earl's Court. Yesterday was the first day in British history when the amount paid out in welfare exceeded what was brought in through income tax, as quoted on Call Kemi last night. Is Britain addicted to benefits? That's not quite right. I think it's the first time, it's not a particular day where this happens, but it is now true that on an annualised basis, we're spending more on welfare benefits than we get through income tax. Will?
I think the question is quite right. So welfare spending is at a record high. I think we need to acknowledge that the majority of that is on pensioners.
Which is a problem.
I think we just need to put that in context, that the majority of welfare spending is on pensioners. But we do have an increase in youth unemployment. I see this in my constituency of Woking. But I talk to so many businesses who wanted to expand, wanted to grow our economy to lower that welfare bill. But because of national insurance increases, because of sort of Trump inflation, the unpredictable world that we're in, they're not growing. And I think the government has been given a really bad hand by events, by the Conservative government, but they have made awful decisions on national insurance contributions and other things that has meant our economy isn't growing the way it should. We're not having young people taking up new jobs. And then it goes back to the question, our welfare bill was too high.
Sorry?
I forgot how anti the national insurance rises the Lib Dems were.
They were, to their credit.
They were super anti them. Anyway. Obviously,
any sane person is.
I'm really sorry, Kevin and Al's Court, but this is a dumb question. You basically have an aging.
Always works. Insult the listener.
You have an aging population, and that drives up the pension bill. You have a completely rigid pension policy, which I don't agree with, and every time that there's somebody on pensions, they're not earning and paying an income tax. So all we're looking at is a rebalancing demographically of the British public, so that more people are not working than working. This isn't about. I'm sick of people demonising disabled people and people who can't find work and young people who nobody will take a chance on. I'm sick of them being demonised. It's ridiculous.
But it isn't really
that's
about.
Quite a rant.
But it isn't about demonising those people.
Well,
it's about
is. I'm
calling
sorry.
out the ones that aren't actually working. That should be working. Because it's.
But every single conversation we have about benefits is about the people who aren't working, who should be working, and every single person who relies on benefits to live feels that as a chill to their bones that they're being tainted with that brush. It's just not true. It's actually really hard to get disability benefits in this country, and there aren't an army of people who are on them who don't deserve them. There are just a lot of people living really difficult lives, and we should be a lot more compassionate towards them.
I don't think that we shouldn't. I think we should be compassionate to those that genuinely need the support. That's the whole premise of how government should work: protect the vulnerable. But it has gone the other way now, and we do have people that are taking benefits that should be out there working, contributing, adding to the economy, and equally, some of them in that pocket of people are put there by this government because they are removing any sense of aspiration that our nation ever had. If you look at all the initiatives that they have introduced, which doesn't make work pay, so for example, they've gone after dividends now. They've also gone after if you want to transfer money into your pension. They've not increased the tax thresholds, and my government didn't either. And I tried to argue that it should have done as well, because we should be making work pay at the end of the day.
I don't think increasing the tax breaks on pensions is going to improve work prospects for young people not in employment, educational training. That's not what.
No, but the reason why there's so many
all it's going to do is privilege old people even more than they are privileged already.
Yeah, but it's quite simple why
completely unbalanced society.
But it's quite simple as to why young people are not getting jobs. It's because this government have made it too unaffordable for employers to actually hire young people anymore with the changes like in national insurance.
That's actually not simple.
Talk to any employer and they will tell you that.
No, there's a huge amount of reasons why young people aren't getting jobs. There are serious encroachments at entry level.
One of the reasons employers aren't hiring, so if we just speak about that, is because of the national insurance contributions.
Well, okay,
because the Labour government have increased the cost of employment, and then there are the new workers' rights legislation coming in.
You all seem very confident about making this identical and quite minor point. That is not a minor point. Well, it is a minor point.
Have you spoken to businesses?
Look at hospitality, for instance. Used to be a huge employer of young people.
Loads and loads of things have gone on in hospitality and in employment. You're basically
and lives closing week on week.
Well, it's okay for a lot of reasons, right? People are spending less in restaurants and bars because they have less. There is a problem with the economy, and everybody knows that. But it's not all about the national insurance payments, and it's not all about the rather small instruments that have been done by this government. There's a huge amount of stuff going on, which is all. Sorry about this, everybody. I've lost my earpiece. Not even though I'm talking, I still need it. Apparently.
Let Albie talk.
Look, I think there are two issues here. One of the issues is that the welfare bill just keeps going up. We saw a huge increase in the number of people claiming entitlement-related benefits, particularly after the pandemic. A lot of it happened under the last Conservative government. I'm sorry, Michelle, but your lot didn't do very much to tackle that either, and we started to see
lot too.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
I wasn't in government, right? You were sat around the cabinet table, and I'm afraid the last Conservative cabinet did not do anything really to tackle the size of the benefits bill. Kemi would say the party's under new management now and they do everything differently. But the truth is, I'm not sure whether or not they would be able to. But the point is, the welfare bill went up. That's one issue. The second issue is it wouldn't be such a problem that the welfare bill went up. All this demographic change that you're talking about, which has led to some of the increase in entitlement-related spending, by the way, if the economy was growing. And this to Liz Truss's credit, was an argument that she made correctly. The measure that she took might have been completely wrong, but the idea that you want to try and increase the amount of tax revenue that the government takes by promoting economic growth is the right thing to do, and it's actually what Keir Starmer wanted to do when he entered government, but he never did it.
But it's so annoying, this. Have you ever heard a politician come out and say, I'm against growth?
Well, this government seems to be.
Everybody wants growth. The point is that you can't conjure it out of thin air. I mean, actually, yeah, but they're not, that's actually they're relative newcomers. But you can't conjure growth out of thin air. No serious economist would suggest that it's in a government's power to create growth.
But they would suggest that if you're stifling business with additional costs and taxes, then it's going to hinder growth. You guys always say this. That was the whole premise of Cameroonianism was, we're going to stop choking off private investment. We're going to stop squashing the private sector. We're going to shrink the public sector in order to unleash the beast of the private. Doesn't work. Doesn't create growth.
What do you think would happen if a country has a very high tax burden and some of the I'm not done, and has some of the highest energy costs in the industrialised world? What do you think happens under those circumstances economically?
Are you asking me whether I understand why that's a low-growth environment? That's completely separate.
So you agree it's a low-growth environment?
That's completely separate to my point.
It's not, but it's my point, is that we've not had a government that has been promoting growth, and we've taken this path of high energy costs, high taxes, high regulation, and stifling business.
Show me a government, any Prime Minister, you've had about 7 of your guys in recent times, show me one of them who has actually created growth.
Margaret Thatcher.
Okay, he wasn't born then.
I wasn't, it's true.
I was.
I wasn't asking you. I was asking Albie. He wasn't born in Margaret Thatcher's era. And,
But he's read a very good book about it.
I have my problems.
I think Iain Dale might have written
it. with Thatcher and that model of growth creation. But you cannot show me a programmatic conservative approach that actually does what they say it's going to do. All it does, generally speaking, is give you a decaying public sector and a decaying
Do you not
NHS.
agree? I mean, I agree with you. Governments do not create growth, but they do create the circumstances where growth can happen.
Well, okay, then why can't they?
Well, because, I don't know, but because they've got not the right people in charge most of the time.
I don't think it is that. I don't think there's any point personalising this. I don't think there are levers that you can just pull. I think the ecosystem is much more complicated than that. I think ever since the financial crash, they've been battling headwinds that if you can't make a kind of adult and realistic analysis of them, you're always going to throw weird Liz Truss-like policies at them, and they never work.
Will, you haven't spoken for a minute.
I'm pleased I started off a good debate on national insurance contributions. Speaking to businesses in my constituency and beyond, that has been awful for our economy. Liz Truss's economics, the Conservative government, was a disaster for our country. But the businesses I speak to, they're like my parents when they saw my school report. I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. Businesses and the public...
Look where you are now. You've had the last laugh.
But businesses they're so disappointed with the government because they've had good economic rhetoric. Let's grow the economy. But they have taken damaging steps, such as NICS increases. And 2 final things. Europe is something I will mention. That's the conditions for economic growth. If we reduce those trade barriers, I was talking to a business only last week that Brexit has added trade barriers. It's costing them jobs. They're not investing as a result. If we can get back into the customs union, that is incredibly important.
But America's got better conditions for growth than Europe does. And if we'd only look across to our cousins in the US, we might actually be able to create the conditions needed for growth, a lower regulatory burden, a lower tax burden and lower energy costs.
Trump's busy putting up tariffs that's damaging his economy and ours.
But their economy is still growing faster than Europe.
Tariffs is never helpful.
What do you want next? Tariffs? I mean... Which bit of America do you want to emulate? Do you want to emulate ICE deportation raids? Do you want to
emulate... We're talking about economics here, Zoe.
Well, no, but
why are we talking about
part
ICE?
Of the same ecosystem. If you're looking at a neo-fascist state and saying, why can't we be more like them for some growth, then I'm...
Economic growth was actually very high under Biden as well, by the way.
I thought you were going to say under...
This is a different psyche that there is in America than there is in Europe, and I'd like us to be more like that.
Let's close this debate with some YouTube comments from the LBC YouTube channel, which many people are watching on at the moment live. Matthew says, Zoe is talking nonsense. So many vacancies in hospitality and retail, and yet young people aren't taking them up. Bally reacts to the debate saying, we need more universal credit. It's just not enough to pay for everything with the Tory inflation effects.
Oh, I don't think that's really fair on the... Well, okay.
Especially as the government at the moment is Labour and they've been in for nearly 2 years. They do need to own some of the
responsibility. And if you think inflation's bad at the moment, wait till this time next year. Right, we'll take more questions in just a few moments. It's 8:46 on LBC.
This is LBC.
So, what's on your to-do list today? Why don't you check if you're eligible for pension credit? It tops up your pension income and also opens up help with heating bills, council tax, and more. Search pension credit on gov.uk or call 0800 99 1234. There's nothing to lose. Check today. Pension credit. Credit where credit's due. Eligibility criteria apply.
Buying a home on a holiday park was the retreat you always wanted. But then came unexpected site fee increases. And that was before the dramatic loss in value. If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, you may have been missold. holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive thousands in compensation. Text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Go all Irish to France with great low prices. With Irish Ferries, you can for less. Irish Ferries. See travel differently. T's and C's apply.
Right then, who's all in for Cancer Research UK's Race for Life? Anglers, ramblers, climbers, five-a-siders, surfers, gamers, bikers, hang gliders. Book clubbers. Are we up for it? Let's go all in against cancer. All in to help fund life-saving research. Sign up now and save 50% off entry to your local 3K, 5K, 10K or Pretty Muddy event. Search Race for Life. Discount ends April 19th, 2026. T's and C's apply.
At Lidl, treat yourself to a whole Easter lunch for 8 for under £1.60 per person, with all the tantalising trimmings. That's a leg of lamb, carrots, potatoes, parsnips, mint sauce, and of course, the gravy. Lidl, more to value. Subject to availability. Selected stores GB only. See lidl.co.uk/spend less for details.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
On our panel tonight, Michelle Donnellan, Will Forster, Zoe Williams and Albie Amancona. John in Luton says, having seen the latest YouGov polling, it seems impossible for anybody to get a... Oh, no, he's a caller. Sorry, apologies for that, John. I was going to read out your question. You can do it yourself.
Oh, no problem. Iain, you said to call back also. Do you remember when I said I was putting a big bet on the Greens to win Thornton? Do you remember that? And you said call back. You said phone back if you win, and I did win.
How much did you win?
How much did you win?
I don't want to say.
Come on. Come on, you're obviously bragging.
How many figures? No, seriously. One doesn't know. I only want to say is it was so blindly obvious they were going to win and slaughter reform, because the reform guy was a disaster. And it was
come on. Was it 4 figures? Was it 5 figures?
Four. Yeah, 4. No, I didn't get that.
Okay, right. What's your question then?
So my question is...
And the drinks are on you.
Thank you. The latest YouGov polling is very interesting, showing the declining Reform Party, as we expected, on 23. Greens 19, up 1. Conservative 19, up 2. Labour 18, solid, holding their ground. And, of course, Lib Dems down at 12. But I just want to say, who would you form an alliance with to secure a government? Because I don't believe anyone is going to become a government by themselves. I hope that nobody will get in bed with the Reform Party, who I can't stand. I lean towards Kemi Badenoch and also the current Prime Minister. And the Greens are basically... They're massively supported by the young. I mean, you can't underestimate how many young people are flooding to the Greens.
Well, I think you're a man ahead of your time, because I think this is going to be a dominant question. Certainly, maybe not next year, but 28 in the run-up to the election. A lot of politicians are going to have to be able to answer this question, and I'm not sure any of them will want to. Will, you're the only serving politician on the panel tonight. I mean, the Liberal Democrats... shall we say, had an interesting experience of being in coalition last time. It's something that many Liberal Democrats try to forget. I never understand why, because they got 75% of their manifesto through and ought to have shouted from the rooftops about it. But your party is going to be very reluctant, probably, to go into a coalition. But do you see this debate coming up right at you.
Well, John's talking about the polls for the next election. We're less than 2 years out from the previous one. Liberal Democrats had an amazing election last time. We won seats like mine for the first time ever, the largest third party in 100 years.
Reform.
I don't think it was our wins that we did well last time. Reform have got obviously more popular since, but we've on a high since 2 years ago. I think we're more focused of the current Parliament than what could happen. A week is a long time in politics. I remember most people that I speak to in Woking or elsewhere are not living and breathing polls. The last time my area did vote, the Liberal Democrats won 2 by-elections in my seat. The Conservatives, which used to hold the seats, didn't even get double digits. I think what we are seeing is an age of the traditional parties declining, where if the Conservatives can't get double digits in a Surrey area, something's gone wrong. Labour and the Conservatives seem like they're declining. Liberal Democrats and obviously Reform and others are doing better.
Possibly, depending on the electoral arithmetic, you will be courted by possibly both the Labour and Conservative parties. The electorate before an election, I think, are going to want to know which way you might jump. And I think it's going to be a very difficult thing for you to say publicly.
Well, John's highlighting at the moment Reform are on course to win the next general election based on what stats John
a majority.
Said. Well, I think for us as Liberal Democrats, Reform should be nowhere near government. That's sort of got to be the key thing for us.
Michelle, this is going to be, I think, a question that Kemi Badenoch is going to need to answer at some point. Would you rather have a Reform Conservative coalition, or do you want another 5 years of Labour?
Well, I think that the answer to this is quite simple. We have to put the country first and the national interest. And the reality is that we just cannot simply afford another Labour government. And we're not even halfway through yet. So goodness knows what state the country is going to be in at the end of this term. And we cannot allow them to win by default by the right splitting. So in my opinion, if that is what is needed, then we should be doing pacts and working with the Reform Party to ensure that Starmer doesn't get in again, or by then, I doubt very much that Starmer will be at the helm by then. We could have Angela Rayner leading the charge by then.
Sorry.
It's interesting. Because actually, you can thump the table and say Reform should be nowhere near government. Then a lot of their language is neo-fascist. But then, there is genuinely, in Labour and in the Conservatives, often an attempt to sound like Reform in the moment, just to scoop up some of their popularity. And I think it's so hollow and cynical. Either you mean it and you might as well be in Reform, and I'd say that to Shabana Mahmood as much as I would say it to Kemi Badenoch, or you don't mean it and you think people are stupid. And so I don't have a kind of massive hygienic nobody go into coalition with Reform. I think if that's where you are, that's where you are. Although I can see that the Lib Dems never would. What I would say is that we talk when there's a lot of kind of weird polling like we're getting at the moment. Sometimes the Greens are on 19, sometimes Labour's on 15. It's weird. People talk as though a coalition is inevitable, but actually what we're looking at is not a political landscape that's fragmenting. It's a kind of political landscape in which it's a bit like at the beginning of a track race in the Olympics for cycling. They're going really, really slowly, very, very close to each other. And the closer you get to the election, one of them is going to start going fast. And then the one behind that is going to win.
But mathematically, it is possible for either Labour, the Conservatives, or Reform to form a majority government on something like 22% of the vote. Now, democratically,
it's terrible.
Even I, who would want to keep the first past the post system,
you're the only person I know who still likes it.
I would find that quite difficult.
It's really, it is bad. It is bad how many votes that the Greens have to collect for a single seat, and Reform. There are.
What I find interesting about this discussion is if you look at the voting intention that John was quoting, it's right to say Reform were on 23%. I think Labour, the Conservatives and the Greens are all in the mid to high teens. The Lib Dems aren't really part of the conversation. You're hovering around 10%, which I find pretty unbelievable for the party that was the main protest voting party to essentially kind of be absent in these discussions about protest voting. And there are two new parties, the Reform Party and the Green Party, who have taken that spot. Now, what would my preferences be for a coalition at the next election? It would be the Tories and Reform, but I've got a lot of friends in Reform. People have made the move from Conservative to Reform. I don't think they've got any interest in pacts with the Conservatives at the moment, because it doesn't really seem like there's anything in for them.
But also, I mean, if the Conservatives were the junior party in the coalition, do you not fear that what happened to the Lib Dems in 2015 could then happen to the Conservatives in 2034?
It could happen. But my honest view about what will happen in the next election is I think there will be a lot of tactical voting against reform. There will be some hodgepodge coalition of left-wing parties, Labour, the Lib Dems on the left wing of the the Liberal Democrat Party, Plaid Cymru and Wales, maybe the SNP in Scotland, and of course the Greens. And there'll be this massive not get reform in vote, and there'll be another 5 years of the left, and then there'll be some sort of accommodation between the Conservatives and reform after that, just like we saw in Canada.
But you're doing that thing again where you call it a kind of amalgamated left, but actually Labour and the Greens are not the same. They're really not the same.
But I think they'd work together to keep reform out.
Well, no, I don't think. I'm not sure that Labour. I think Lib Dems are more likely to work with Greens than Labour are. Was that right, Will? Would you say?
Well, I've been attacking Labour most of the evening. The Lib Dems disagree on Labour on so many economic policies, Europe, and on the Greens, they're on another. They're completely different to us on the defence policy. The fact that Putin would like their defence policy, I find terrific.
But you're quite similar environmentally.
Well, the Greens don't talk about the environment anymore.
The latest Green MP, did she mention it in her maiden speech? I don't believe she mentioned the environment once.
She talks about it all the time.
So are you saying that you categorically wouldn't support a coalition with another party?
No, I'm not saying that. I think the idea that we're talking about what could happen in 3 years just feels a bit ridiculous when we should be talking about issues now.
Yeah, Liberals always say that.
You're sitting on the fence here, aren't you?
Let's talk
can you
about
predict
something
what the
now.
next 3 years is going to bring? I can't. That's why I'm not. I just don't know.
I'm saying very clearly, we need to put the country first. I would therefore support.
And you think Nigel Farage in Downing Street is putting the country first?
I think a right-wing government would be far superior to this government, and therefore I support a pact. Whereas your position is that you're just going to sit on the fence and not really indicate either way. So it's quite confusing to understand where you're
saying reform
edging.
Shouldn't be anywhere near government is not sitting on the fence.
No, but you're leaving all the other parties up for grabs.
I mean, what if the Greens did spectacularly well and they were sort of 40 seats off being able to govern on their own, and you had 70, 80, 90 seats, whatever? I mean, would they be a potential partner in a coalition government for the Lib Dems?
Well, I think it's potential, lots of options. But we had the Johns discussion earlier of he's won some money. This is about how would I spend my lottery winnings if I ever won it, which I don't
but
win.
The voters are going to want to know.
They're going to want to know on which different options there are. What about our policies? What about our record as MPs?
You must have a preference.
Our preference is not reform. Our preference is not reform. They should be nowhere near government.
That's a negative preference.
Yeah. Well, I think this country, the last thing we need is Nigel Farage walking into St Downing Street.
Right, time for our fun question. After we've read this YouTube comment out, Mr. Lee Kicker, careful how you say that, says, still a way off election time, lots can happen. He's obviously channeling you that way.
It wasn't on my phone, that wasn't me messaging it.
Fun question from Lee. With news coming out that climate change has got so bad that by 2040 we're going to have to look at alternatives to the cotton industry, 4 young engineers have created a company that uses potato starch to make clothes. So that got me thinking, what's the weirdest thing that you'd like to have your clothes made of? Well, Albie, you've got quite a striking suit on today. What would you like that suit to be made of?
Well, this is made from wool, so I think the cotton crisis wouldn't be affecting this particular suit. But in the summer, obviously, you can't wear wool. So I really hate wasps. So if there was a weird thing that I'd want my clothes to be made from, it would be the wings of wasps.
Oh my God, that's so macabre.
Because I kill them anyway. We all kill wasps. We spray them with bug spray.
I thought you were going to say
get them out of the room.
Clothing for masochists.
If I had to pick a weird thing, let's pick an animal I hate that it's acceptable to kill and make clothes out of them.
Okay, well now I'm going to sound like a psycho as well, but actually I would use the fur of a dog, but still a live dog. I would just like a nice one, like a cockapoo or something. It's so soft.
Corey, she's never coming on again. Michelle.
I'm not sure mine's that weird, but I would use second-hand sleeping bags for 2 reasons. One, I'm always cold, so it'd be quite practical. And the second reason is that energy prices are going to soar so much that I would be able to leave the heating down.
Will?
I think sort of similar to Albie, not in wasps, but a suit that is cool in the summer that doesn't wrinkle, unlike a linen suit. So I think that works. As a vegetarian, I found those ideas terrifying, to be honest. But, yeah.
Avoided answering.
I have avoided answering.
Again.
Yeah. Lib Dems, we don't take a stand on these issues. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The normal position.
Right, thank you all very much indeed. Now on tomorrow's cross question, we have the Deputy Chair of the Social Mobility Commission, Resham Kotecha, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire, business newspaper City AM's opinions editor Alice Denby, plus the Politics Home reporter Harriet Simmons. Right. After 9 o'clock, what are we talking about after 9? I've completely forgotten. We're talking about the doctors' strike. So professional, aren't I? We are going to ask you is why is Keir Starmer playing this game of brinkmanship with the junior doctors? I don't recall the Conservative government indulging in this sort of thing, because he's essentially saying to them, unless you agree by the end of Thursday to the terms of the offer that you've already got, we are going to abolish 4,500 training places for resident doctors. He's going to have to reverse on that, isn't he? Otherwise, surely he himself is damaging the NHS. 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, Donald Trump says it's terrific the King and Queen have agreed to an official state visit to the US next month. There were rumours it could be paused because of the president's criticism of how the UK government is handling the Iran war. Hours earlier, he warned Britain's military to get your own oil from the Strait of Hormuz, which has been blockaded by Tehran. Liberal Democrat spokesperson for Foreign Affairs Callum Miller has told LBC he's not convinced the King's trip will make a difference.
Donald Trump behaves in an incredibly compulsive way. He's the kind of person who takes the good things that he's given, banks them, and moves immediately on without leaving any credit behind. We unprecedentedly offered him a second state visit to the United Kingdom, and since then he's resiled on the tech deal, which was the government's much trumpeted outcome of that visit, and yet we're blundering ahead to offer a royal visit now.
Meanwhile, the King and Queen are not expected to meet survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, while UK police investigations continue. More UK troops and air defence kits are going to support Gulf allies who are under attack from Iran. The Defence Secretary says Sky Sabre air defence missile systems will be deployed in Saudi Arabia. Action carried out by UK Typhoon jets in Qatar will also be extended. John Healey had this message for leaders in the Gulf region.
Britain stands with you and will stand with its partners. That's why we're announcing new air defence systems for Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Bahrain, and the extension of the joint UK Typhoon squadron with Qatar.
A man has been found guilty of being the owner of an XL bully that attacked and killed an elderly man in Cheshire. 84-year-old John McCall died of his injuries a month after mistakenly wandering onto Sean Garner's driveway in February last year. And senior doctors in England, including consultants and specialists, are to be balloted for potential strike action. They're unhappy about a proposed 3.5% pay increase from the government. The British Medical Association's vote comes as the Prime Minister issued an ultimatum over next week's walkout by resident doctors. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 48 points at 10,176. The pound buys $1.31 and €1.14. LBC weather, mainly dry across the UK tonight. Some spells of rain for western Scotland, lows of 2. A band of rain pushing across northern areas tomorrow, mostly dry in the south with a mixture of cold and sunny spells and highs of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Katie Dartford.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
9:05. A very good evening to you if you've just joined the programme. Now, the Prime Minister has given the British Medical Association 48 hours to call off the 6-day doctor strike in England after Easter or face losing 1,000 extra training places, although a figure of 4,000 has been mentioned, but I think that's over 3 years. Now, last week, the BMA called the strike over a deal which would see doctors receive a 3.5% pay rise this year, so slightly above inflation, some expenses, including exam fees, paid for, and an increase in the number of training posts. Now, the union said this was not enough, given inflation is expected to rise and that pay for resident doctors has not kept pace with inflation since 2008, although I seem to remember a massive pay rise for resident doctors that West Streeting gave them almost as soon as the election was over. Well, LBC's Deputy Political Editor Aggie Chambray has the details on what the Prime Minister was trying to achieve with this threat to the BMA.
He would say that he was not making a threat. He was merely pointing out the consequences of the BMA's actions. But effectively, he has said to the Resident Doctors Committee of the British Medical Association, he's given them a 48-hour deadline to consider a deal that they were given previously, which includes an offer of thousands of extra NHS training posts before they go on strike on April the 7th. Now, the reason, as you ask, he's taken this approach is because they believe, people in government believe, and indeed the NHS believes too, that if they will not be able to basically make good on this offer of 1,000 extra jobs offered this year, because they would open in April in a matter of days. And so they basically need to make the decision of whether or not those jobs are put on stream, essentially, very, very soon. So they have given the BMA a deadline of Thursday for advertising those jobs, which would have started in August. And also in terms of those jobs existing in the first place, those 1,000 extra jobs, which is part of the deal, they have budgeted, the government, £250 million for these jobs, which is about, they say, a week's worth of strike action, which is what seems to be going ahead next month. So we heard earlier from the NHS England boss, Sir Jim Mackey, who confirmed the offer to expand training places will come off the table if an agreement is not reached. This was him speaking to our colleague Nick Ferrari earlier today.
So you were aware of this ultimatum? Number 10 did let you know it was coming down the line?
I wasn't personally aware of it, no. But when you had lots of discussions...
Are you supportive of taking away those 4,000 places? You are supportive of that?
I'd rather we just reached agreement, to be honest. I think that's the ideal position. There's still a chance. My preference would be...
Of course.
Colleagues getting a room sorted out.
Of course.
But the reality is that those doctors, those extra training places cost money.
Yes.
If we're going to be spending money on managing industrial action, pay other colleagues extra to cover shifts, that money will disappear.
It's a necessity from the log. If the logjam stays, you really don't have an option cash-wise.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I see.
So this deal, which was given to the Residents Doctors Committee, was never actually voted on by the British Medical Association. But I've talked about those 1,000 extra jobs. The 1,000 extra jobs is part of a minimum of 4,000 new additional specialty posts to be delivered over the next 3 years. And then there's also offer on things like out-of-pocket expenses for things like exam fees to be covered, and progression through the resident doctor pay bands is also to be sped up if indeed the offer was to be accepted, which at the moment it does not look like it is going to be. But we also heard earlier today, Iain, from the BMA chair, Dr. Jack Fletcher.
I don't think that this dispute is resolved by headline generation, and I don't think that it's resolved by making threats. I also don't think it's resolved by moving the goalposts at the last minute, which is essentially why we've had to take this action, because the discussions on pay that we've been having, which were constructive and were genuinely, we thought we were making progress, the goalposts were changed at the last minute by the government, where the investment offer was reduced and stretched over 3 years. So I think that this ends in a negotiating room. I'm very willing and I'm ready. I'm sat here in London, ready to negotiate whenever the government would like to. We're hoping to have more talks this afternoon to avoid this strike action. I don't think that the way to avoid it is by making threats in the media around cutting doctors' jobs.
That was Dr. Jack Fletcher speaking this morning. So they did actually have talks all of today too, as he said he was in London for those talks.
This is an act of brinkmanship by the government, isn't it? I mean, we always think of Labour portraying themselves as the party of the NHS. I'm not sure Keir Starmer ever envisaged him being in a position after 18 months as Prime Minister where he'd essentially have to issue threats to resident doctors. How has it got to this?
Well, it's basically, as you say, it's who's going to blink first. And, the government is basically saying we're taking this deal off the table of those 1,000 new jobs. How it's got to this,
That's holding the NHS to ransom, isn't it?
Well, I think some in the BMA do see it like that, Ian, but some in the government see it in the way that they see that the BMA is holding the NHS to ransom by going on strike again for this amount of time. So, the government is saying the Prime Minister wasn't making a threat. That's definitely, as you heard from Dr. Jack Fletcher there, that is how they have seen it. But, we've got a statement too from the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who says the BMA seems surprised that if they reject the deal on offer, go on strike, their members don't get what the government is offering. We have time before Easter weekend to resolve this dispute. A deal on jobs and pay is on the table, but that walkout, as I say, is due from April the 7th at 7 a.m. until April the 13th.
Okay, thank you very much. And it was Sage Chambray there, LBC's deputy political editor. It does seem strange, doesn't it, that a Labour government of all governments would adopt this approach of brinkmanship. Do you think it'll work? Who do you think is going to blink first? I mean, I think Jack Fletcher was right there, that in the end, these things are always settled on the negotiating table. But a 6-day strike, and the previous strikes weren't 6 days, do they really need to be that long? I wonder whether the public sympathy with the resident doctors is as strong as it used to be, because it certainly was very strong. Do you support the government's stance on this, or do you think, no, they've called this wrong? It's making me more sympathetic to the doctors. 0345 6060 973. Well, let's talk to Dr. Rida Khan, who is a resident doctor working in the NHS. Rida, very good evening. Thank you for coming on. Were you rather surprised, maybe even shocked by the threat that the Prime Minister has made?
Good evening, Ian. Thank you for having me. I feel like the Prime Minister Keir Starmer's statement seems quite threatening in nature. It seems like it will have a negative impact on the NHS in the future, because he's threatening to remove the extra training posts he wanted to give when he knows that there's a big job crisis in the NHS with resident doctors. That means he wants to stop today's doctors from specialising, becoming consultants, becoming GPs, and ultimately help patient. And it's for the patient care, especially in a time where there's so much short staffing, so much pressure, and the NHS is overwhelmed.
So if Jack Fletcher, the head of the Resident Doctors Committee of the BMA, rang you up today and said, look, Rida, I want your advice. I'm not sure what to do here. I don't want to put these training posts at risk. But on the other hand, we've got a strike mandate. What would your advice to him be?
Well, at the moment, for example, for GP, there's over 18,000 doctors that are waiting to get into GP training, with over 4,000, probably just over 4,000 places. So with the 1,000 places that Keir Starmer is saying, it's a step in the right direction. But when you have over 18,000 doctors waiting to get into GP training, these are applicants that have passed the exam, are on the waiting list to get into GP training. I would say that he needs to take this seriously. Keir Starmer needs to actually understand that there's a big job crisis. It's causing unemployment, and it's causing a lack of job security as well.
Well, I think that's all true. But the fact is, if he delivers on this threat, you're going to be 1,000, I think 1,500 worse off this year, and 4,500 altogether if he then repeats it for the next 2 years. I mean, it's one of those things where the BMA is almost sort of cutting off its nose to spite its face, isn't it?
The pay is a big aspect to the strikes. It always has been from day one. It's a long-term investment in the NHS. When the pay is what they want, the restoration for the pay, there's a real-time cut that they feel. There's a risk of this real-time cut because the government has proposed to give it over a few years. So the issue is you're not going to retain doctors. There's a staffing pressure, because the staffing pressure, when you're not retaining doctors and doctors are leaning towards leaving the NHS or going to these different countries, there's a lot of pressure on resident doctors on the shop floor. That means resident resident doctors have to, when there's short staffing, they have to look after more patients that they probably wouldn't have if it was well staffed, more acutely unwell patients, could be probably complex medical patients where they miss their breaks, miss their lunch, and have to stay overtime. This overtime causes burnout, causes fatigue, causes them to be demoralized, low morale, and then they drop out of medicine or they want to just completely move to a different country. And this is really, really over the years going to affect the NHS. So we need to retain doctors. The pay is a big, big aspect of this, to get the fair pay in order to get these better working conditions and getting it to get a safe number of staffing on the wards.
Because when this part of the dispute first broke out, whenever it was, I remember talking to various people from the BMA saying, oh no, this isn't about pay, this is about terms and conditions. And yet you're saying it is more about pay. Can you tell us what the settlement was after the election that West Streeting came to? Because we were told it was something like 22%. But I mean, that's just one figure. What was that settlement?
So the pay conditions that they want, the 26% increase, so they want it to get the pay restoration that it was back in 2008. I think pay and conditions go hand in hand, because when you've got better
that was achieved in the last settlement, surely.
But it wasn't, it was below inflation, so they weren't happy because it wasn't the full restoration for what doctors wanted from day one. So they've always had the same goal from day one. Throughout the years, training, there's been a training crisis, there's been speciality places, it's been really tough for people to get into speciality training. So that became another aspect to the strikes, that doctors were not getting into training. There was a lot of unemployment. There was a bottleneck going into training services. But the pay has always been their day one. And even now, it's just not been agreed upon. And now, of course...
My point is that last year there was, I can't remember whether it was 22 or 29%. And now this year, there's another similar claim. And yet you look at other people in the NHS, you look at nurses, for example, or ancillary workers, they haven't anywhere near caught up, and they're paid far, far less than resident doctors. Why should resident doctors take precedence over other groups within the NHS?
First of all, I do understand that everyone who works in the NHS works really hard, and they also deserve, to be paid fairly. I really do think so, because it's the whole wider MDT that makes the NHS work, whether that's nurses, healthcare assistants, and also doctors and many others who work in the NHS. So I don't want to take that away from them. But the years of training that doctors have done, they've sacrificed a lot of their youth, a lot of the years of studying, getting into, and they have these dreams of wanting to go into speciality training, becoming consultants, progressing in their career, which they deserve. They don't get the working conditions that they signed up to. So the working conditions are getting worse for them. There's grueling hours, there's overtime, there's missed breaks, there's causing them fatigue, causing them to burn out. And because of this, obviously the strikes, they feel like the pay restoration has not been put in place from the day one of strike. Yes,
and I accept that. But the same could be said of teachers. The same could be said of prison officers. The same could be said of police officers. Why should resident doctors be a special case?
I think resident doctors should be a special case because it's a long-term investment in the NHS. Resident doctors are in the front line working hard. And if you're losing these doctors and they're leaving the NHS, they're going to countries like Australia, Canada, America, there's short staffage. That means that it's affecting patient care overall. And this NHS is a big asset to our country, and we can't afford to lose these doctors. So if you're not going to listen to the doctors, you're going to lose the doctors. Overall, it's costing the government even more money, because now, because of the staffing gaps that they have, they need to employ temporary staff that will be at higher rates, whether they're consultants, whether there's resident doctors, they're higher rates. And of course, when the strikes go ahead, the rates are higher as well for doctors to step in and to make sure their staff are at a safe number. So all of this is costing the NHS way more money than it would if they actually just negotiate a good deal and give the restoration, because it's not a pay raise that doctors are asking for. It's just that restoration from day one that they've wanted.
OK, thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. Rida Khan there, resident doctor working in the NHS. Do you think the Prime Minister is right to adopt this brinkmanship position? Because in the end, he's either going to win or he's not. And if he doesn't win, in a sense, everyone's the loser, aren't they? I mean, who do you side with on this? Because we've been talking about resident doctor strike for years now on LBC. when Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting were in opposition, they both promised that this would not be happening under a Labour government. Well, it is happening under a Labour government. From April the 7th, there will be no resident doctors working in our hospitals for 6 whole days. I mean, I forgot to put that question to Ridder there, because I do think that it is, shall we say, taking the Michael to go on strike for 6 days in the NHS. I don't think resident doctors should be striking at all. But if they are, I mean, 6 days really is far too long, isn't it? And particularly if you're somebody who's got a family member who is going to suffer because of that, you're not going to have a lot of sympathy with them. Or are you? Because I know in the past we've had plenty of people ring in saying, well, I accept that there are going to be risks to this, but I'm fully on the resident doctor's side. But if you're a nurse, and I'm really not trying to sort of pitch public sector worker against public sector worker, but if you are a nurse, if you are a teacher, if you're a prison officer, I mean, what do you make of this? Do you think, well, we'd like a bit of action there too? Because I fully accept that resident doctors have lost out over the past 17 years. But hasn't virtually everyone, whether they're in the public sector or the private sector? There isn't an endless pot of money, is there? But if there is more money, where would you put it? 0345 6060 973. 21 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
Spring has sprung. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and save 25% at Waitrose. Perhaps a citrusy Lamonette agave, perfect with halloumi, fresh off the BBQ? Or Esprit de Puissigan with notes of ripe red berry. And maybe go all out with a crisp bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne. Cheers to spring. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and fizz and save 25%. Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected stores online. Subject to availability. Excludes Scotland box wines and bottles price £6 or under, £100 or over.
At ulesprosperity.com, you buy the car and we pay you up to £600 per month in rental income. For conditions, visit ulesprosperity.com.
McGriddles, a new McDonald's breakfast. So it's maple syrup infused. It's sweet, then it's savoury. Because the sausage, you know, and the cheese and the egg. Oh, it's got the golden arches stamped on it too. Make that make sense. It's hard to put into words, but Until 11 a.m, subject to availability. Fees apply to delivery orders while stocks last.
Imagine sweeping through green fields, floating 5 feet above ground. Sun on your face as you slide by, on track to your destination. Not a care in the world, as you simply lean back. And before you know it, you're there. This is how travel should feel. And on our trains, it does. Avanti West Coast. Feel good travel.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
9:23 on LBC, 0345 6060 973. Do you think that Keir Starmer is right to play this game of brinkmanship with the BMA? He's given them a deadline of Thursday evening, I think that's right, to accept the terms of this new offer, or he will withdraw more than 1,000 training places. A slightly strange position, I would say. I don't think that it's one that the general public will have a lot of sympathy with. Certainly, obviously, resident doctors don't. But I wonder whose sympathies you have on this, whether you actually do side with the resident doctors. I mean, they're asking for, or they've been offered, a 3.5% pay rise, which is slightly more than the rate of inflation. Now, admittedly, we know that inflation is going to rocket over the next 6 months because of the war in Iran. So I suppose from that point of view, they could say, well, we think inflation is going to be 10% by the end of the year. And that's not an outrageous thing to believe. So we want to have a much bigger pay rise. But they've also got these other offers as part of the settlement that the government has put to them, but they've rejected it. And they haven't, as far as I understand it, they haven't actually put this revised offer from the government to their members. Sarah says, I supported the doctors before this government came to power because I thought the last government were unreasonable. However, I think this government have done what they can, and the doctors can't have everything they want at once. There has to be a compromise, and I support Starmer, says Sarah. Let's go to Jonathan in Greenwich. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, Ian. Hi.
Hi, what would you like to say?
I suppose I don't agree that it's such a strange position. Working in the NHS myself, these training places generally are offered across the world. I think it's problematic because they're not offered to UK resident doctors as a matter of course.
Why is that?
At the moment we attract clinicians from across the world to these places with, for example, PhDs over and above standard medical qualifications. They have a worldwide profile. They present at global medical events. And they, will often be recruited above UK kind of resident doctors, but they're better qualified than UK resident doctors ordinarily.
But do other countries do this? I mean, I would have thought any country would give priority to their own people.
Well, these are better qualified people. So it may be an argument to extend this to UK resident doctors. Brilliant. But it's not a disservice to patients if this doesn't happen. So if resident doctors don't want to take this offer, that's tough for them and not for patients.
Do you think that most people who are not resident doctors in the NHS but work in the NHS support their stance?
I think there's an argument to say that we need to nurture our own kind of homegrown talent. But equally, what's best for patients, actually? What's best for patients is recruiting from around the world. So it's great that we're taking a position at the moment. It may be retracted. It's great we're taking a position to recruit UK resident doctors, but actually it's not going to affect patients negatively.
Well, isn't there a moral issue here, though? I've always had a real difficulty with recruiting doctors from countries who actually probably need their own doctors more than we need them. I mean, I understand why it's happened over the years, but is it really right to recruit doctors from sort of sub-Saharan Africa, from countries who don't have the same kind of healthcare that we do, and every doctor that works here rather than there is diminishing the health of the people in that country?
Well, I agree. I mean, it's a moral dilemma, but what do you want as a patient? Do you want the best qualified clinician treating you?
Well, I suppose in an ideal world you would, but there are obviously balances to strike here, aren't there? I mean, what you're effectively saying is, well, if somebody's better qualified, we wouldn't need to recruit any British doctors. I mean, that would be a ridiculous position.
All I'm saying is that in terms of Keir Starmer's position, actually patients aren't going to lose out with this stance at all, because we're just going to go with the status quo. And we lose all those placements for UK resident doctors, but no patient is going to lose out if that's withdrawn. So that's what the BMA needs to reconcile itself with.
So do you think the BMA will actually give in to that?
Well, I think the BMA needs to consult with individual doctors and put it to a ballot.
But they're refusing to do that, aren't they?
Yeah. Awful.
OK, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Ellie says this strike is shocking. It's quiet enough at weekends and bank holidays, and this lot are getting an extended Easter holiday. Well, I suppose you can look at it in that way. I mean, it's starting on 8. When does Easter finish? So we've got, I'm working over Easter. I'm trying to remember what the dates are. Tuesday the 7th. Oh, so you can have a nice long Easter weekend holiday, and then you have another 6 days off through strike action. Nice work, or not, if you can get it, eh? This is from Annie, who says, I date a farmer, lucky you, who works 80-hour weeks for approximately £25,000 per annum. We need doctors and farmers, but we rarely value those who produce food. My partner has had 2 burnouts. He never receives fair pay, but his livelihood has been put at risk every year. This one from Sue. Forget the percentage figure for doctors' pay rises. Just look at the actual figure that they want. Is it unreasonable? They damn well deserve better pay. At least they're saving lives. I bet you earn more than they do, and you aren't saving lives. I work in the private sector, and what I earn is a matter for me and my employers to discuss. But you're right. I do. I don't feel guilty about that. I don't see why I should be made to feel guilty about what I earn. I think that resident doctors are underpaid. I think they have every right to want pay restoration. But there are so many other groups in the public sector that have also suffered from this. And I fail to see why it is always the resident doctors who should get a better deal than in any other group. Because I think there are other groups that are equally as deserving. I mean, if I had a pot of money and I was going to dole it out, having seen that the resident doctors have had such a big pay rise last year, they would not be first in the queue if I was Prime Minister. The first in the queue, I suspect, would be prison officers, followed by the police and then teachers, because I think they all are grossly underpaid compared to resident doctors. Discuss. 9:31 on LBC News Headlines with Katie Dartford.
The US President says it's terrific the King and Queen will be paying him a state visit next month. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey says the trip's unfair on Charles after Mr Trump's criticisms of the government. More UK troops and air defence kits are going to support Gulf allies who are under attack from Iran. Donald Trump's also urged Britain's military to get its own oil from the Strait of Hormuz, which Tehran has blockaded during the Middle East war. The BBC's admitted it failed to respond to a journalist's query last May about allegations involving Scott Mills. There's no suggestion it's linked to his sacking yesterday. Police have revealed they interviewed him in 2018 about suspected offences involving a boy under 16 before dropping the case due to a lack of evidence. LBC weather mainly dry across the UK tonight. Some spells of rain for western Scotland, lows of 2 degrees.
This is LBC.
Spring has sprung. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and save 25% at Waitrose. Perhaps a citrusy Lamonette agave, perfect with halloumi, fresh off the BBQ? Or Esprit de Puissigan with notes of ripe red berry. And maybe go all out with a crisp bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne. Cheers to spring. Buy any 6 bottles of wine and fizz and save 25%. Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected stores online, subject to availability, excludes Scotland box wines and bottles price £6 or under, £100 or over.
With over 50 years' experience, at Fidelity, we believe there's a difference between investing and being invested. Investing is having access to guidance, tools, and expert insights. Being invested means feeling confident about your future. Investing is choosing from a wealth of investment options. Being invested means focusing on your long-term goals. For ISAs, pensions or advice, be truly invested with Fidelity. Go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
Imagine you in a nice comfy seat, with your hands behind your head, taking in the views, instead of taking on the road, maybe even taking a nap. That's the bliss of getting where you need to go without worrying about driving. Book your train journey via avantiwestcoast.co.uk and we'll take you there. Avanti West Coast. Feel good travel.
Iain Dale on LBC.
At 9:33 on LBC, we're talking about the resident doctor strike, which is due to begin on Easter Tuesday, the 7th of April. It'll last for 6 days, unless they cave in to the government's demands. Well, I say the government's demands. The government wants them to accept the pay offer that was offered. And on the face of it, it's a reasonable offer. 3.5% pay rise this year. That's slightly more than inflation. Some expenses, including exam fees paid for, and an increase in the number of training posts. Do you think they should cave in to the government, or do you expect this strike to go ahead? What effect do you think a 6-day strike would have? Particularly keen to hear from you if you work in the NHS. Heather is in Hereford. Hi, Heather.
Yes, well, when are we going to appreciate our doctors? You know, how would you like to be rushed to hospital this Easter and find there's not enough doctors to see you and things go wrong? I mean, it's just diabolical. I mean, why is it we spend all this money on migrants, they get whatever they want, And we spend money on the French police, but we haven't got money to pay the doctors. It's ludicrous.
Well, I mean, doctors are paid far more than the average of anybody in the UK. Admittedly, in their first year, they're not paid a huge amount. It's about 38,000, I think. But it does progress up to 40, 50, 60, 70,000.
I understand from the news that these junior doctors, student doctors, they get only £18 something an hour. Well, I'd give them at least a minimum of 20. For goodness sake, give them £20 an hour.
Well, most of them do get much more than that. It's only in the first year, and when you put it in an hourly rate like that, it doesn't sound very much. But if you multiply £20 an hour by 52 weeks of the year, it's a reasonably sizable sum.
The point is, they're worried. I mean, they should have accommodation when they've got to be at the hospital on time. They should have nearby accommodation, hopefully free. And
what? Sorry, that's ridiculous. Why should doctors have free accommodation?
Well, why not? I mean,
let's give every doctor £100,000 a year then. I mean, let's let the land flow with milk and honey.
Well, the thing is, your life depends on them. And they should be appreciated. When they go to work, they shouldn't have anything on their mind to hold them back. Their mind should be solely on what they're doing. And that's what their vocation is. And you can't find everybody that can do this kind of thing. You just can't find them. They're like gold. And I think, they've got to be well fed. We feed the army, don't we? We feed the Navy.
So they should have free food as well as free accommodation?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
They should go to work on a full stomach, and they shouldn't have...
Well, they're not on destitution wages.
Pardon?
They're not on destitution wages. I mean, your argument would be better if you applied it to nurses who do not often get the average wage.
I think it's run right, We don't appreciate them. They shouldn't have a care in the world when they go to work. They should know that they have their wages and they have these. They shouldn't be hungry. They shouldn't be overworked.
Nobody's suggesting that doctors are going hungry.
Well, if you miss meals and you're working on an empty stomach and you're a surgeon or something, I mean, you might faint. For goodness sake,
I mean,
after them.
If that really is the best strength of your argument, Heather, I mean, I'm sorry. I agree that we should appreciate doctors. I agree that they deserve a good wage. I do agree that they should be rewarded for the years of training that they undergo. But you know as well as I do that there are competing demands on public sector pay. There isn't a limitless pit, and I'm sure you would think the police should be paid in the same way. I'm sure you would agree that teachers and prison officers should be paid in the same way.
The police put their life on the line.
Exactly.
I mean,
so they deserve a lot more money, but where's it going to come? Heather, we can't have a conversation if you're just talking over me the whole time. Where's the money going to come from?
Well, we can find it when it comes to strangers just turning up and they want this, that and the other. We've got to rearrange the deck chairs, get our priorities in order.
Well, if we go by your policies, we would be on the Titanic because we can't afford to pay everyone another 50% on their pay.
We can find the money. I just got to find money to pay for the council tax that's just gone up. This government, they've got car parks and they've got monies coming in. They've got lotteries and monies coming in and all kinds of things.
I think, Heather, you've indulged us too much. Thank you. Let's go to Steve in Colchester. Hello, Steve. Steve, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So, I mean, look, I'm not really into the doctors bit, but obviously I support everything that's going on, and I don't agree with what they're doing. What I'm concerned about, right, is that something I don't think anyone appreciates is that nurses in the NHS are being offered voluntary redundancies to leave because we're supposed to be trying to get nurses on board, increase the capacity of the nursing industry and everything. But nurses have been offering voluntary redundancy to leave the industry.
Why?
They're trying to cut costs. It's ridiculous. How is it that if you've been a nurse for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, you're now being offered voluntary redundancy? Crazy. I don't understand that.
Well, I must admit, that's the first time I've heard that. I thought nursing numbers were actually increasing.
No, because people are being offered voluntary redundancy, and I'm not going to say name names, but my lady works in the industry, and she's been offered voluntary redundancy. She can't take it because she hasn't been there long enough, but this is happening and no one knows. It's random.
Well, it's very interesting what you say there. I'm going to pass this on to one of our reporters to investigate, because if that is happening all over the country, then I think the general public do deserve to know about it. As I say, look, I haven't heard that before. I wouldn't necessarily expect to have, maybe, but I would have thought it might have featured in newspapers. Or anyway, we will look into that, Steve. Thank you very much. Let's go to Craig in Cannock. Hello, Craig.
Hi, Ian. I think what we need to do, I think it's fair comment that the resident doctors should be paid more overall, but I do agree with your comment that there's other people on the, if you like, the public payroll that should be in front of them in the queue to get the pay rises.
Yeah, and the problem is whenever you say something like that, you're then accused of trying to divide and rule, and I'm genuinely not. But I think you have to point out that it's not all about resident doctors.
Yeah, well, exactly. What I actually think would be a fantastic way to do it is absolutely everybody on the public payroll, whether we're talking about the Lords with their daily attendance figure to people on benefits, we should work out the fair amount to pay everybody.
Yeah, but who decides that?
Together. It would have to be some sort of independent-ish body that would do that, but have it so that they would then get those numbers fixed in relation to each other, MPs, council workers, bin men, soldiers, the whole lot, everybody that's on the public payroll, and then have it so that absolutely everybody gets the same percentage pay rise every year from then on. But it's a case of, as you say, working out what would be the fair figure and who would work that out to start with for everybody.
Well, I can see the logic of what you say, but the problem is that in most of the public sector now, there isn't national bargaining. It's often regional or local. So what a refuse collector earns in Newcastle upon Tyne may be very different to what they earn in Woking.
That's a comment. Let's geographically adjust it, but it's something where
you're creating a whole new expensive bureaucracy there, aren't you?
Only once. Once it's been done once, then the bureaucracy of working out the exact figures has been done. All you're then doing is deciding, having whoever it is in power can work out what is, for example, a figure that the country can afford, that is a reasonable figure to add on, say something hopefully near inflation each year, and that would be able to be done. But it would only involve the whole issue of the huge bureaucracy, just the ones, to get the starting figures.
I'm not sure that would eliminate strike threats, though, because there will always be a sector that thinks, for whatever reason, maybe economic circumstances change, maybe some sector becomes more important in the national conversation, and the union representing that sector will then say, well, actually, we are far more important now than we were 5 years ago, so we need to have more than the others do. I think what your system would work in a land flowing with milk and honey where we all sing Kumbaya, my lord. But I don't see it working in the real world.
I think it's fair to say, though, that every time, regardless of whatever system anybody comes up with, there's always going to be strike threats, regardless of who it is. It's a thing of, I know you started off with your response to me saying about avoiding dividing everybody, and what you're actually doing by the idea that I'm thinking of is more trying to bring people in together by basically saying, well, the nurses get a 5% pay rise this year, so the doctors get a 5% pay rise, and the soldiers get a 5% pay rise, and the police get a 5% pay rise. And so in that way, you're not othering people. in different roles.
But surely each particular sector ought to have their own mechanism. Like, for example, MPs' pay is decided by an independent body. It's not decided by MPs. And they weigh up all of the aspects of the job and cost of living and all the rest of it. And they come up with a figure. And yet, even if the figure was only 0.1%, people would still complain that politicians get more than they did the previous year. Sorry, go on.
I don't think people would complain about politicians getting,
but they do,
a larger pay rise if everybody else in the public sector was also getting that same pay rise.
Well, but politicians aren't getting more than other people.
But if you've got the situation where politicians are getting an identical amount to other people, then that argument then becomes null and void.
Well, they more or less are. I mean, I think the pay rise this year was 3.5%. That's the same that resident doctors are getting.
But I did, when there was the issue a few years back about how much the nurses were getting, I actually looked on some documents about what had happened with regards to public sector pay rises between, I think it was 2008 and that year, which I think was 2023. And politicians were getting significant, in that period, had got significantly more than average for public sector.
Well, my recollection is throughout that period, MPs' pay rises varied between 1% and 3%.
No, you're probably very right, but at the same time, you'd got situations where the nurses' pay was held for 2 or 3 years.
You are right. I mean, I think the one... Well, I've already mentioned some of the public sector workers that I think do deserve higher pay rises. I do think nurses are among that group too. But I mean, they got a bigger pay rise a few years ago, but I don't think they've been treated particularly brilliantly in the last couple of rounds. Thank you very much indeed, Craig. We'll come to more of your calls in just a moment. Your views on the resident doctor strike is going to last 6 days from April the 7th. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Donald Trump tells Britain to stop relying on the US and learn to fight for ourselves. He's got a point, hasn't he? Plus, what a time for the King to confirm a state visit to the US. Is that the right decision?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
If you were missold a home on a holiday park, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive compensation. Text ADVICE to 78900.
How does a $20 golf gadget end up being used as a bomb detector in war zones worldwide? I'm Alice Levine, and this is Explosive Lies, the podcast exposing a scam that fooled governments and security services across the globe. Open our free Global Player app and search Explosive Lies to start listening today.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Get that Toyota electric feeling with the all-new, all-electric Toyota Urban Cruiser. Available with 0% APR representative and £1,500 deposit contribution. And save £1,500 with the Toyota Electrified Saving. Visit your nearest Toyota centre. Price from $29995. Available on Toyota PCP when financed through Toyota Financial Services by 30th of June 2026. Optional final payment. Indemnities may be required. See website conditions apply.
Cancer doesn't care about childhood. It doesn't care what they miss out on or how much you want to protect them. But we do. At Great Ormond Street Hospital Charity, we fund life-saving research, vital family support, and the special things that help seriously ill kids be kids. Until no childhood is lost to cancer. Join us. Search Gosh Charity.
Are chocolate eggs truly bound to round? No. Waitrose have unveiled a rich #1 Ruby Fruits flat egg, sprinkled with dried berries, a tangy marvel in confectionery, and the #1 blonde chocolate almond croissant egg, topped with milk chocolate and crunchy roasted almonds. Chocolate eggs are only the beginning.
Indulge in a range of Easter treats at Waitrose, the home of food lovers.
Selected stores subject to availability. Prices may vary in Channel Islands, Little Waitrose and Partners and concessions.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
9:49, Katie says, I've had enough. The government should be investing in social care, but instead the doctors strike and more money goes to the doctors instead. If social care was sorted out, it would lighten the work of the doctors and free beds. But there is never any money left because of the doctors getting all of the attention. They've had their turn already. They should step aside for a while so that other care workers and NHS workers can get a turn for a change. Let's go to Sham, who's in Southend. Good evening. Hello, Sham.
Hello, hi there.
Hi, what would you like to say?
I think I just wanted to add a bit of context that my feeling is that there is a lot more to this strike than just the headline elements of pay and jobs crisis. I think there's a sentiment of dissatisfaction and sort of anti-establishment thinking amongst student doctors because of a series of things that have been happening over the last 10 years or so. I think one of the main things is changes to how doctors are recruited, as well as other factors such as changes to the student loan system, to which doctors are, I think, disproportionately affected compared to other professions due to the length of their course and the earning bracket that they fall into, as well as so many other factors that have happened. The trigger point being the implementation of a change in contract by Jeremy Hunt several years ago. Prior to that, doctors hadn't really been on strike at all, but I think that was a sort of tipping point that made doctors feel like they were losing their autonomy. They already felt like they were losing their autonomy, but that was sort of the last straw, as it were. And I think a lot of...
What do you mean by autonomy?
Well, I think, so for example, I'll give you an example regarding how doctors are recruited for and how that's changed over the last few years. So it used to be that your job when you finish medical school was allocated based on your performance at medical school, the sort of grades you got and the achievements that you had whilst you were at medical school in terms of extra work that you'd done and prizes that you won. And overnight that was sort of changed and basically replaced with a national test that everyone takes. That's a sort of situational judgment test that asks you a bunch of questions that you might be asked in other careers as well about your response to a certain situation, in which most candidates answer the same answers and most people give the same answers. So it's more of a random number generator, to be honest, because there isn't much difference between different candidates' answers to that. So all these medical students who've been working really hard to get good grades were suddenly told their grades didn't really matter anymore. And then similarly, they were told that if they'd paid money for extra degrees and taken years out of their training to do these extra degrees, then they didn't really count anymore either. And so they basically just wasted money on that. And these sort of decisions were just made without any consultation with the doctors that were in training. So it's quite disheartening to then finish medical school and then be told that you could be moved randomly to any part of the country or Northern Ireland or Wales just by random number generation, which is now what it is. And then on top of that, because they've relaxed the visa requirements for doctors that are applying to jobs within the UK, so that they've opened it up internationally to all applicants, which could be argued as potentially a good thing. But the impact that has had is that it means there's so many applicants. So when you're selecting for highly specialist training programs in competitive or very specialist specialities, there is no capacity to properly screen all these candidates. So they end up resorting to basically paper-based screening, when that sometimes means looking at basically whether a candidate has a PhD or not, or whether they have an extra qualification or not, and filtering out candidates on the basis of that. But as I'm sure you know, having a higher degree, a research degree such as a PhD, doesn't necessarily mean you're better placed to do the job. And it also means that doctors who are recruited, for example, to become a surgeon, it's possible to be recruited to be a surgeon and get appointed as a surgical trainee to do operations on patients without having any assessment of your surgical skills. So without having any, by just having letters signed by other people in other departments, for example. And so essentially you don't actually have to have any surgical skill to be appointed as a surgeon. I think
that's
outrageous.
Various
changes. Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of changes, to be honest. And I think these are just frustrating doctors because I mean, it's not just that. I've just talked about selection.
But who brings in these new things? Because, I mean, you mentioned Jeremy Hunt earlier when he was Health Secretary. There's no way that Jeremy Hunt, as a politician, is going to have any sort of make a decision like that. That has to be done, surely, within the bureaucracy of the health service.
No, what I meant was Jeremy Hunt is just a specific point regarding he was kind of the face of a new contract that was implemented at the time in around 2016, which meant that doctors were required to basically work extra weekend and out-of-hours shifts. I mean, we already worked lots of weekend and out-of-hours shifts, but the summary of that was that if you did work on a weekend or out of hours, then the time that you got paid for that would be valued less than before. And to be honest, to me personally, as a resident doctor, it hasn't even made too much of a difference to my pay from that contract implementation. But the point is, just the whole resident doctor body was just emotionally stirred up by that because they just weren't. It was just imposed on them without any consultation, and that kind of just triggered the process. And there's so many other things that the resident doctors are upset about. I mean, just speaking for myself, I mean, there's all of these targets that are being imposed on us mean that, for example, if I want to schedule patients for surgery, sometimes I have to prioritize patients who've been waiting a long time over patients who have been waiting less time for surgery but who have cancer or more urgent conditions, just because a certain target or patient would breach a certain target, for example, and even if that patient who's going to breach doesn't even want to have surgery urgently, and they actually want to wait, sometimes I'm asked to convince the patients to have surgery earlier so they don't breach a target. And things like this just really frustrate us. And I think a lot of doctors, I'm not necessarily speaking for myself, but I think a lot of the doctors and a lot of my colleagues feel like this is the only way that they can have their voice heard. And it's just a way to sort of, I guess, lash out as well.
Okay. Sham, I could talk to you for the rest of the programme, but we've only got 2.5 minutes left, and I do want to fit in Lily in Aston, so I hope you forgive me. Thank you very much. You've been a brilliant caller. Lily, go ahead. Hi.
Hi. It was a point that I just came in on, that it seemed that there doesn't seem to be very much awareness about nurses being asked to take voluntary redundancy.
Yeah.
So forgive me, I'm not actually commenting on the doctor's strike.
No, carry on.
But my daughter, who is an 8B manager, mental health nurse, and her whole directorate have been told that they have to save tens of millions of pounds, and has been asking for nurses to put in for voluntary redundancy. Out of their trust, they had less apply for voluntary redundancy than they were expecting or hoping for to make these savings. So the senior managers have been told that they just need to be cutting jobs. So, no, you're absolutely right, Ian. It hasn't hit the headlines. It hasn't been in the papers. And I just think it's absolutely scandalous. And the nurses that are going to be left are going to be asked to do more and more and more, managing multiple units at a time.
Well, I have been told that a lot of the nurses that are employed directly by NHS England are being made redundant because NHS England is not going to exist. I think later on this year it's actually being abolished. But you would hope that most of those nurses would be able to find alternative employment within the NHS.
There are no jobs. There are absolutely no jobs. I mean, my own daughter, I mean, I don't want to give my location or anything else. Obviously, I need to protect her. But, my own daughter has been looking for jobs in a huge area, prepared to move. And there are just no jobs.
Well, that's very depressing to hear. I wish I could talk to you for longer, but we have reached the end of the show, Lily. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for all of your calls and messages this evening, and I'm back tomorrow from 7. There's a brilliant episode of my All Talk podcast being released at 1 o'clock in the morning with Naz Shah, the Labour MP, who's written her childhood life story called Honoured, and believe me, it's quite a story. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur, but right now, it's Ben Kentish.
Thanks very much indeed, Ian. Hello there. A very, very good evening indeed to you this Tuesday night. Hello and welcome to Ben Kentish on LBC. On the show,
it's not just the United States Navy. Last time I checked, there was supposed to be a big bad Royal Navy.
Stop relying on the United States and learn to fight for yourself. That's the message to Britain from Donald Trump today. He thinks that we haven't been there for him during his war in Iran, and so he's not going to be there to defend us. Which basically means, doesn't it, the NATO alliance is all but dead, and the strange sound you can hear Vladimir Putin cackling away in the Kremlin. But all that aside, Trump actually, for once, has a point here, doesn't he? We do need to stop